Hotep, how's everybody doing today? Hey, welcome to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We are live. It is Thursday, July 6, 2017. And we are live tonight, running a little late and trying to get all the technology to work also. How's everybody doing today? All right, so we should be broadcasting live on Facebook. So I'm going to test this out and test out my audio also. All right. And so tonight we're going to deal with three main topics. We're going to talk about Colin Kaepernick in Ghana. OK, Colin Kaepernick in Ghana and for the 4th of July. And in Ghana, he had some very interesting remarks for African Americans. OK, and I'm going to show you the difference between what the Daily Mail.uk said about his comments and what AtlantaBlackStar.com said about his comments. Okay, I'm going to show you the difference between the two of them. We're going to be broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio here in just a minute also as well. Okay, so setting that up also so you'll be able to call in with questions and comments as well. And then we're going to talk about some myths about slavery. We're going to dispel some myths about slavery as well. I saw an article, a couple articles in the last 2 days dealing with this topic also. So we'll talk about that as well. We'll just dispel some myths about slavery. Okay, so we're live here on Blog Talk Radio. All right, we got everything working. Hey, welcome to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. The founder of the African History Network also. Hey, we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. So those on Facebook, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. We have a lot of information to talk about tonight. You don't want to miss a minute of it. And this show will be podcasted also on iTunes and on Blog Talk Radio or Blog Talk Radio page also. It'll be podcasted there as well. Okay. All right. So on tonight's show, we're going to deal with, as I said, Colin Kaepernick. Used to play for the San Francisco 49ers. We know Colin Kaepernick led the protest against the violence against African Americans by police, by taking a stand and kneeling down when it came to the national anthem during the beginning of football games, right? And because of Colin Kaepernick, all this information came about the history of the national anthem, going back to Francis Scott Key, September 13th, 1814, writing the poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry during the War of 1812. And it talked about the third stanza in the defense of Fort McHenry, but it's not just the third stanza. The entire song is a white supremacist song. OK, Francis Scott Key was a slave owner, came from a slave owner family. He was a white supremacist, and the whole thing is coming out of white supremacy. So all this came out. Well, Colin Kaepernick during the 4th of July was in Ghana. He's done an ancestry test. He's traced his ancestry to Ghana, and he has some very interesting comments about African Americans celebrating the 4th of July, or as I call it, and Dr. Ishaka Musa Barashango called it, the 4th of July. OK. So we'll talk about that. And then also we'll deal with dispelling some myths about slavery, I've seen 2 good articles in the past couple of days dealing with dispelling myths about slavery. So we'll talk about that some. We'll do a brief overview of an online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And this is an online course that I teach. It meets on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. You can so anything you miss, you can go back and watch it over and over again. So we'll have a live course tomorrow, actually. OK, and we'll post the information so you can register for the course. As soon as you register, you can watch the first 2 sessions, and there's bonus content you can watch also. And then also I want to talk about the East St. Louis riot, race riot of 1917, the East St. Louis race riot of 1917. Okay, and I have all my information here. I got a bunch of notes all over the place. And July 2nd was the anniversary of the East St. Louis race riot. And this was a very, very brutal race riot that took place, white people attacking African Americans in East St. Louis. So we're going to talk about that some as well. And we'll deal with this date in African American history also. All right. So how's everybody doing? The call-in number is 914-338-1375. 914-338-1375 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. And you can call in and listen by phone, or you can you can call and listen by phone. And if you want to ask questions, press the number 1 key to put you in queue so we can bring you on the air. Okay. 914-338-1375. Hey, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now it's correct your own behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you have been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events and history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T to 22828. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T to 22828. Sign up for our email newsletter. Also go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Sign up for our email newsletter there as well. All right. So I'll be in Atlanta July 15th through the 6th, the 14th, 15th, 16th, 15th through the 16th for the Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Expo. Visit LiberatedMindsExpo.com for more information. LiberatedMindsExpo.com for more information. This is in Atlanta. It's the 6th annual conference, happens the 3rd weekend in July in Atlanta. Okay, so many of you saw the broadcast I did for February, for July 4th, the 4th of July, dealing with Frederick Douglass, John Hanson, Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, right? And I dealt with Frederick Douglass, probably his most famous speech, what to the slave is the 4th of July. What to the slave is the 4th of July. And that was delivered July 5th, 1852. July 5th, 1852. Okay, in Rochester, New York. What to the slave is the 4th of July. Well, Colin Kaepernick, well, and in that speech, if you're not familiar with it, go listen to the broadcast I did. You can go to our YouTube channel. We have the video there, and also go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on listen to podcast of the Michael Imhotep show. You can listen to it. But Frederick Douglass, former slave, runs away from a plantation in Maryland in 1838, becomes the most significant African-American figure in the 19th century. Okay, most significant African-American figure in the 19th century. He gives a scathing rebuke of the 4th of July and basically tells them that this celebration is yours, not mine. Okay, he talks about African people being enslaved at this time. This is 9 years before the Civil War starts. Okay, which starts April 12th, 1861. This is 2 years before the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. So he gives a scathing rebuke of the 4th of July. All right. Well, Colin Kaepernick was in Ghana, okay, for the 4th of July. And he posted on Instagram a message for African Americans. Okay, 2 good articles about this. DailyMail.uk has one article about this. DailyMail.co.uk. How can now the article? I'm going to show you the difference between the 2 articles, between the 2 headlines, right? So the one from the Daily Mail, which is a United Kingdom publication, this is owned by Europeans. They have some good articles, but AtlantaBlackStar.com is African American owned and operated. Shout out to AtlantaBlackStar.com. So the article from the Daily Mail. The name of that article is how can we truly celebrate independence on a day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs? Quarterback Colin Kaepernick posts controversial message as he visits Ghana. Quarterback Colin Kaepernick posts controversial message as he visits Ghana. Now, this is the Daily Mail. The article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, name of that article is Colin Kaepernick questions celebration of 4th of July, finds independence at home in Ghana. Colin Kaepernick questions celebration of 4th of July, finds independence at home in Ghana. Okay. See, in their title from an African-American publication, they didn't call his comments controversial because it ain't nothing controversial about it. He's correct. There's nothing controversial about it. So if we look at the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, shout out to Neil, I think it's Nelson at the AtlantaBlackStar.com, man. They're doing a great job. Free agent quarterback Colin Kaepernick hasn't been afraid to question American traditions, so it makes sense for him to ditch typical 4th of July festivities. The former San Francisco 49ers outspokenness about Black oppression extended to a tweet he made on Independence Day, where he questioned how Black Americans can, quote, celebrate on a day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs. Colin Kaepernick is in Ghana, and you see the pictures of him in Ghana. He posted on Instagram, and we have some on our Blog Talk radio page, blogtalkradio.com/The African History Network show, our Blog Talk Radio channel. Okay, so he asked the question of African Americans. He said, how can Black Americans, quote, celebrate on a day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs? So he's saying, how can you celebrate the independence of America on a day that at the same time, July 4th, 1776, Europeans were robbing our ancestors of their independence and keeping them enslaved? So Colin Kaepernick made the trip with his girlfriend, Hot 97 DJ Nisa Diab, and the charitable pair received a warm welcome. Now, Nisa Diab, when you research this, and I did a presentation dealing with Colin Kaepernick as well late last year, and I did a lot of research on Kaepernick and his stance against the national anthem. Okay, and I don't stand for the national anthem, and no African American, I think, should stand for the national anthem. And even Jackie Robinson, who served in the Army, even Jackie Robinson, in his autobiography in 1972 called I Never Had It Made, he explained why he could not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem anymore also. Even Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in 1947 with the Brooklyn Dodgers, he even said in 1972 he could never stand for the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance. So Colin Kaepernick makes this trip with his girlfriend, Hot 97 DJ Nisa Diab, who is really the one credited with his new consciousness and pushing him. When you read articles about this, I've read articles saying it's really suspected that Nisa Diab was the one really behind that and helping him reorientate his thinking. The clip, so he did a video clip put on Instagram. The clip opens with the following lines from the Frederick Douglass 1852 speech: "What to the slave is the 4th of July? What to the slave is the 4th of July?" Now you're going to see when they talk about that speech, some people call the title "What to the Negro is the 4th of July." No. It was called "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Frederick Douglass made it plain. He said, this ain't for us. Okay. It was called "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." All right. So the narrator at the beginning of the video says, what have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence? Okay. And this is an excerpt from Frederick Douglass' speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." And the narrator says this as the camera cuts to the male and female dungeons at Elmina Castle, where enslaved Ghanaians were tortured. So he's in Ghana and they're showing this footage. Okay. So Kaepernick and Nisa Diab also visited Keta Municipal Hospital's Children's Ward and watched performances by the local community. Colin Kaepernick also wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty while assisting women with gathering building materials. The athlete has been heavily focusing on charity work since he launched his national anthem protest at the start of the 2016 NFL season. So this actually goes back to the preseason. The second game of the preseason, August of 2016, is when, if I remember correctly, it was Steve Weish, a sports journalist, who noticed that Kaepernick was sitting on the bench when the others were standing for the national anthem, and he asked him about this. Okay, Kaepernick did it in the first game of the preseason, but it wasn't noticed till the second game of the preseason. Okay, and then you're going to have some of the players who participate in different ways in the protest against the national anthem. But the real protest was against the oppression of African Americans, especially by some police officers, and fighting against white supremacy. And the national anthem is a symbolism of that white supremacy. Okay. And Kaepernick explained this was not against the veterans or the troops or the military or things like this. Okay. He explained it. All right. Now, some people wanted to act ignorant, like what's her name? Tommy Lauren, I think was her name, who used to be with the Blaze, a little idiot white woman, little ignorant little millennial white woman who was interviewed by Trevor Noah. I think it's Tommy Lauren, little brain damaged Stefford wife. Okay, she wanted to play dumb. Oh, why is he protesting? Oh, he should explain. He explained it a number of times. Why don't you use Google? So immediately after Colin Kaepernick, after he comes out about his stance against the national anthem, backlash followed. And since Kaepernick opted out of his contract with the San Francisco 49ers in March of 2017, he has remained unsigned. Many have speculated his politics have been the cause of his ongoing free agency. Many have speculated that his politics have been the cause of his ongoing free agency. I could tell you, yeah, that's the reason why. Because if you look at articles, I think the Bleacher Report had an article about this, how 7 executives at the front offices, 7 executives of the front office at different NFL teams were interviewed, and they said they didn't want to have anything to do with Colin Kaepernick. And they said if the owner of the team, one of them said, if the owner of the team said that I had to hire this guy, I would quit. Okay, because see, they are afraid that he will wake other players up on the team and they'll take a stand. And that's what they're afraid of. Okay. And a lot of these teams are owned. Let's be real. A lot of these teams are owned by white supremacists. A lot of these teams, I'm not saying every last one of them. I think there are 33 teams in the NFL. I really don't follow football. To me, it's a waste of time. I follow things like the money, like it costs like $5 million for a 30-second commercial for Super Bowl 50. Follow things like that because my background is in marketing. Okay, but to me, following football is a waste of time. I'm in Detroit. What the hell am I going to follow the Detroit Lions for? That doesn't even make sense. That's a waste of time. Okay, so Mike Unc on Facebook said that's true, Imhotep. That's a waste of time sitting up following them. Now, if you own part of a team, or if you own a bar or something like that, I can understand that. But if you have to buy tickets to a game, I don't know what the hell you sitting up there following that stuff for. I mean, you do what you want to do. It just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so Colin Kaepernick is absolutely correct. 914-338-1375 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. 914-338-1375 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Press the number 1 key to put you in queue so we can bring you on air if you have a question or comment. And you can also call and just listen also if you want to. I know we're broadcasting on Facebook Live on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook. We have almost 1 million followers. Be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. I'm going to go to the article from the dailymail.co.uk. Now, the Daily Mail has a lot of good articles, but I find it interesting that the Daily Mail called Colin Kaepernick's comment controversial. When I'm sitting here reading it, I'm like, where's the controversy? He told the truth. Before we go to that, I want to let you know, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Two things. I have 2 new bundle packs there. Number one, we have the Reclaiming the African Mind bundle pack. It's 6 of my latest DVD lectures, Ancient Kemet, the Winter Solstice, and the History of Christmas. I did that in December of 2016. The Distortion of the Legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., The Revolutionary Will Not Be Televised on the Television. I did that in January of 2017, this year. We have Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. I did that in February 2017. So I do profiles on great African women in our history, all throughout the history. The Light of Ancient Egypt Awakens the African Mind to Economic Empowerment. Did that in February of 2017. I did at African Liberation Day, May 2017, African American Resistance in the Era of Donald Trump, Voter Suppression, Reparations, and How Elections Have Consequences. Did that May 2017. And then June 24th, 2017, in Lansing, Michigan, the home of Malcolm X. I did Malcolm X 50 years later. Why is he still relevant? So that's a bundle pack we have. You get 6 DVDs for $50. Reclaiming the Mind, Reclaiming the African Mind bundle pack. That's right on the homepage, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Then also we have a bundle pack where you get 23 of my DVD lectures for $150. It's regularly something like $300, something like that. You get 23 of my DVD lectures. We have that bundle pack. That's right on the homepage also. So check that out as well. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to, so you can give us a call, 914-338-1375, 914-338-1375. Press the number 1 key to put you in queue so it can bring you on the air. We'll go to callers in just a minute here, and share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Okay, so when we look at the article from the dailymail.co.uk, once again, the name of their article about Colin Kaepernick, about the same thing. It's called How Can We Truly Celebrate Independence on a Day That Initially Robbed Our Ancestors of Theirs? This is a quote from Colin Kaepernick. Quarterback Colin Kaepernick posts controversial message as he visits Ghana. I don't see what the controversy is. NFL free agent Colin Kaepernick has posted video of his trip to Ghana online. It shows the quarterback visiting hospitals and schools, helping locals in Keta. Said he had to find where his ancestors came from for personal independence. Former San Francisco 49ers player refused to stand during the national anthem. Okay, so this article is from July 5th, 2017. So in the article, it says NFL free agent Colin Kaepernick has posted a controversial message criticizing July 4th celebrations as he visits Ghana in a quest to find a personal independence, end quote. Okay, so they go on with the quote from How Can We Truly Celebrate Independence on a Day That Intentionally Robbed Our Ancestors of Theirs? So this is a direct message to African Americans. The article goes on to say it shows the former San Francisco 49ers quarterback who famously protested police brutality by refusing to stand during the national anthem last season, visiting schools and hospitals. Okay, and his girlfriend is there with them also. Okay, every brother needs a sister like DJ Nisa Diab. Okay, now I know she's a Muslim because from my understanding they're going to have a Muslim wedding. I think she's Arabic. Okay, I think she's Arabic, but that's just the standing behind this brother. I'm just saying she is standing behind this brother, or standing. When I say standing behind, I don't mean behind in a patriarchal way. I mean supporting. Okay, so don't call in talking about I don't mean standing behind in a male chauvinist way. I'm talking about standing behind, supporting him. She's side by side with him, okay, but she's supporting him. So in the Instagram post alongside the video, Kaepernick explained, quote, in a quest to find my personal independence, I had to find out where my ancestors came from, end quote. In a quest to find my personal independence, I had to find out where my ancestors came from. Now, keep in mind, he's biracial. He was raised by adoptive white parents, and he has sense enough to realize he needs to trace his ancestry. He's biracial, right? His mother was white, his father's African American. He was raised by 2 adoptive white parent, but he had sense enough to realize I need to find out who the hell I am and where my ancestors came from. So he told, Colin Kaepernick told of how he traced his ancestral roots to Ghana. And he said, quote, I want to visit the sites responsible for myself, for being forced into the hells of the Middle Passage. Okay, quote unquote. I wanted to see a fraction of what they saw before reaching the point of no return. I spent time with the Ghanaian people. So he visited a local hospital in Keta, ate a local dish named Banku, B-A-N-K-U, at locals' homes, and paid his respects to Kwame Nkrumah's Memorial Park, named after the former Ghanaian president who led the country to independence against the British in 1957, which kicked off the African independence movement. That starts with Ghana winning its independence from the British in 1957. Dr. King was there in Ghana in 57 with Kwame Nkrumah for the celebration. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A lot of people don't know this about Dr. King. Dr. King followed the developments of the continent of Africa and the African liberation movement, because the African liberation movement on the continent of Africa was happening concurrently with the civil rights movement in this country and the Black Power movement. There's an article from AtlantaBlackStar.com called How Steel Sharpened Steel. How Steel Sharpened Steel. Okay. Check out this article. We'll pull up I'm pulling up now. How Steel Sharpened Steel. The connection between the civil rights movement and African independence movements. How Steel Sharpened Steel. The connection between the civil rights movement and African independence movements. And these were happening concurrently. And they were drawing strength from us. We were drawing strength from them. And Dr. King went to Ghana each year for their annual celebration until he was assassinated. A lot of people don't know this about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They know I Have a Dream. Well, that wasn't even the original name of the speech. Original name of the speech wasn't I Have a Dream. It was called A Council Check. When you actually research it, and I deal with this in my presentation, my lecture, The Distortion of the Legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the revolutionary, will not be televised on the television. When you study the original draft of that speech, the phrase I Have a Dream doesn't appear anywhere in that speech. The name of that speech was called A Council Check, because he was talking about economics. He wasn't talking about no damn dream. So we have to study our history. So, okay, so you have this. So check out that article, How Steel Sharpens Steel. We're going to post a link here on the thread of the broadcast on Facebook. Okay, we'll post it there, and we'll see. I wonder if I can open up. Can I open up the chat room? Chat is open, moderated. I wonder if I can open up the chat room here on Blog Talk Radio. We'll see. Haven't had the chat room open in a long time. All right. What is this here? Okay, so I want to go back to this article here. Okay, so chat room is open on Blog Talk Radio, also blogtalkradio.com/The African History Network Show. All right, I want to go back to this article here from dailymail.co.uk. Okay, so Colin Kaepernick said, I felt their love, talking to the Ghanaian people. I felt their love, and truly I hope they felt mine in return. He finished in the post on Instagram to his 1.6 million followers. Okay. So they have some pictures here. I'm going to show you these pictures. Y'all want to see this? I'm going to show you these pictures because I'm broadcasting through Crowdcast onto Facebook. So I can show, I can do this. This is technology. All right. So let's go here. Whoop, there it is. All right. So let's scroll down. Okay. So here we go. All right. So here he is in Ghana. And let's make sure we're following along on Facebook. Okay. It's showing up on Facebook. So here he is in Ghana. NFL free agent Colin Kaepernick has posted a video of his trip home to Ghana and a quest to find personal independence. All right, here he is looking like a Ghanaian chief. All right. All right. Here he is with his fiance, DJ Nisa Diab from Hot 97. Okay. Here she is with a pot, type of pot or something on her head. She's wearing a gele. All right. She has a head wrap. Here he is when he's with the San Francisco 49ers. Okay. Here's his fiance again. Kaepernick told of how he traced his ancestral roots. Okay, so he's here doing some work as well. All right. Here he is. He visited a local hospital in Kemet in Ghana and ate a local dish named Banku at locals' home. So here he is with the Ghanaian children. And the quarterback also paid his respects at Kwame Nkrumah's Memorial Park, named after the former Ghanaian president who led Britain, who led Ghana to their independence in 1957. Okay, there's his fiance also. All right, every brother needs a sister like that. I'm serious. All right, so Kaepernick has taken up several humanitarian causes over the past few months to pass his time as a free agent. All right. Okay, so check out this article here from dailymail.co.uk. Kaepernick asked the question, how can we truly celebrate independence on a day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs? I don't see what's controversial about that question. Okay. To me, it's a legitimate question. All right. Okay. So let's go to the phone lines. 914-338-1379. 1375 914-338-1375 is the call-in number. Press the number 1 key to put you in queue so they can bring you on the air. All right, let's bring this caller on. All right, hey caller, welcome to the African History Network show. How you doing? I'm all right. I want to make sure. Let me just check something. I'm going to check my volume, make sure people can hear you. Okay, go ahead. I can hear you. And we're testing the volume on here. Go ahead. I can hear you. And we're testing the volume on here. Go ahead.
To visit Elmina Slave Castle and also talk to some of the African chiefs. And what I was impressed by is that the Africans in Ghana basically were quite remorseful of the transatlantic slave trade, especially their complicity with it. I think that people should look at some of the works of Dr. Suleiman Yang. He's a former chair of African Studies, and he talks about the complexity of the transatlantic slave trade and the Africans who were quite complicit in that process because it was a business, unfortunately. Ghanaians.
Let me ask you a quick question. Let me ask you a quick question. You say he's a former chair of Africana Studies. Where?
Yeah, Dr. Suleiman Yang was the former chair of African Studies at Howard University.
Oh, okay, Howard. Okay,
he has since retired.
Okay.
Right, and basically he, unfortunately, how do I say this? That whole transatlantic slave trade period in West Africa and also the East African slave trade is, it's a very, very horrible part of human history. But it was business. And unfortunately, Africans were quite complicit in that process. And I noticed something that a lot of people don't want to hear. But I mean, and again, the concept of a collective African identity didn't come from Africa. It actually came from African Americans and West Indians and made its way back to Africa.
That's true.
So 500-600 years ago, Africans did not see themselves as one people because of the oppression of African Americans in the West and in the Caribbean. We began to see ourselves collectively as a people. And so, again,
Pan-Africanism.
When I was in Ghana.
Yeah, that starts in the 18th century in the U.S. Yeah, that didn't start in Africa.
You are 100% correct, sir. Pan-Africanism is an African-American or West Indian creation. And so let me briefly say this, and I get off the lines so others will call. But again, Ghanaians were very, very remorseful of their if you will, their participation in this brutality, and that has left Africa in its present condition. unfortunately, what has happened is, in many respects, the diasporic blacks, African Americans, and others, in some ways, are in, financially speaking, and economically speaking, are in a better situation than the African continent, because you had tens of millions of people that were used to build the West. And so now the westernized countries are quite successful, and Africa, because it lost so much of its human capital, is now just beginning to rebuild. But anyway, thank you so much for the conversation tonight.
Africa lost so much of their human capital.
All right, sir.
Wait a second. Before you go, let me ask you a question. So Dr. Suleiman, what was his name again?
Yes. Okay. A number of Dr. Suleiman Yang, he's from the Gambia. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant scholar. He retired, maybe 5 to 7 years ago at Howard University. And what I may do, I may post, he did an 8-minute and 47-second videos, and where he is showing where Africans on the continent, reporters are going back to Africa and visiting the slave castle in Senegal. And unfortunately, what enough Africans do not do is teach this aspect of history. A lot of Africans on the continent are very detached from the transatlantic slave period, and it resonates more with Africa, more with West Indians and African Americans than Africans on the continent. Because again, I mean, to actually think about what happened, if you actually sit back and think, for example, as you well know, the East African slave trade lasted for 15 centuries. The transatlantic slave trade lasted for over 400 years. If you actually think about what happened, and unfortunately, the Africans who were complicit in this horror, it's honestly unthinkable. You know, and it has left the African continent in a place where they're target to be constantly marginalized. And I'll say this one more thing too.
Well, I had a question.
One of the reasons why blacks in the diaspora, are looked down upon is because of how Africa is viewed today. A place of poor management, of poverty, of disease. And unfortunately, a lot of it was due to the transatlantic slave trade, which Africans were very complicit in this insanity.
Well, let me ask you a question. So the transatlantic slave trade goes from about 1400 to 1888. Okay. The Portuguese are the first ones involved. I'm sorry, 1440 to 1888. The Portuguese are the first ones involved, and they're quickly followed by the Spanish. And it really explodes with Columbus and his 4 voyages, so-called discovering the so-called New World. Now, and I've studied the transatlantic slave trade a lot also. When you talk about Africans being complicit, give me some examples, and at what point are you talking about? The reason why I say that is because Dr. Malefi Asante, who I know, he's written an extensive article about this, and he talks about complicitness among 4 African nations, but he talks about also how that is unfairly extrapolated over the entire continent of Africa, or not even just the entire continent of Africa, but over the entire West Africa. And he gives some examples of this. So give me some examples of what you're talking about.
Well, according to Dr. Suleiman Yang, who is an expert in African history here, he basically says that I would love to send you a short video of his. It's only 8 minutes. That's right. He clearly explains everything. That's right. And I'll send this to you. As a matter of fact, I may link it to your page tonight so you can take a look at it. But Dr. Yang talks about starting back, as you say, in the 14th century all the way through the 18th century, that during the transatlantic slave trade, Africans and their kingdoms, from as far north as Mauritania, all the way down through what is now Angola and the Congo, were unfortunately collaborating with the Spaniards, the Portuguese, the British, etc., because of all of these tribal wars. And again, one of the reasons why they did this is because, listen, Africans did not see themselves collectively as a group of people. So let's just say if you were
Europeans didn't either, and Europeans didn't either.
And right, and so if that happened, basically you were sold into servitude, and like I say, sir, I think the difficult part of it, I mean, if people look at this, it's just the length of time that it happens. And again, we all know that race is an artificial construct. We know this. And again, this idea about Africa or Africans is they did not have the concept at all. It just didn't exist.
Well,
and
they didn't have the concept.
And going to Ghana, right? And in going to Ghana, when I talked to the chiefs, and I know this is the 21st century, and like I said, they were apologizing, and they were saying, "We are so sorry that this, that we were a part of this bad behavior." And see, I will say this. The African continent today is still suffering from what I call post-traumatic stress disorder, because you had 1,500 years of the Arab slave trade, 400 years of the transatlantic slave trade. Then after that, you had colonialism. Then after colonialism, you had the impact of the Cold War. Then after the impact of the Cold War, you have, of course, neocolonialism. And so, again, that's why
still being raped of their mineral wealth and resources, and still being controlled by white supremacy. And now in some countries, the Chinese. Now in some countries, the Chinese. Right.
But listen, and also too, here's the crazy thing that most people don't realize. Even with African Americans, with all of our issues in the United States, I just recently saw some statistics that basically said that if Black Americans were a separate nation apart from the United States, Black Americans alone would be roughly the 10th largest economy in the world.
Oh yeah,
alone.
Sure. $1.3 trillion economy.
Pretty. I'm sorry.
Yeah, $1.3 trillion economy. Yeah.
I mean, which is absolutely amazing, because what's amazing to me is here it is, the people who have been oppressed and enslaved for 250 years in the United States today, in 2017, is probably it is the most powerful Black community on the planet, without question.
Right.
I mean, that's the irony of all of this, of this institution, of this long legacy of African people being marginalized. But again, I'll just say this briefly. I was thrilled to see Ghanaians tend to kind of say, listen, reckon with this, and say, you know what we did was absolutely wrong. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be divisive tonight.
No, that's fine.
Oftentimes when voluntary immigrants come to the United States, especially Black immigrants, they tend to view African Americans as somehow less than. And you know what? And I often tell African Americans this: you have nothing to be ashamed of at all, because you were the people who built the most powerful nation on the face of the earth. And when these people come to the United States, they're benefiting from your legacy.
Right.
These people, oftentimes, African Americans are providing moral cover for these Black immigrants who are coming here.
Right.
And a lot of, as if we're.
Yeah. And a lot of immigrants coming here don't understand history, don't understand really the history of slavery in this country. And don't understand what was taken away from them, and the exploitation of at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865.
Let me share something with you, what you may or may not know. And I'll ask you the question: what is the largest airlines on the African continent?
The largest airlines on the African continent? I don't know the largest airlines.
Yes, sir.
I don't know the largest.
I'll tell you. Okay, the largest and the most sophisticated airline on the African continent, which is on par with any Western airlines,
right,
is Ethiopian Airlines, right?
Okay.
Most people don't realize that Ethiopian Airlines was actually founded by Black Americans in 1945.
Okay.
We founded the largest airline on the African continent. African Americans,
right?
And and I've just finished the book, which. I've got to say this again.
Go ahead.
No African American should ever be ashamed of what we've done, because again, we were responsible again for building and developing, out of oppression, the most powerful nation ever on the planet.
Right.
And so when people come to the U.S. and look at us as if we're the rest of the earth, I think to myself, wow, you really don't know who we are. And I don't say that to be braggadocious. It's just it just is what it is. I mean, there is no other group like the African Americans. There's no other group in this country. And so I think that, no, I'm serious.
No.
I think we need to be proud of our contribution. And to add one more thing too, I tell people too, the very, very foundation of Black Canadian culture is us. Yeah. Because prior to the 1960s, all the Blacks that were in Canada basically came from the United States. up into the 60s. And so that's just my point.
And then what happened was even before then, and long before the 1960s, and after the American Revolutionary War, those Africans who were enslaved by the colonies, you're going to have thousands on the low end, 20 to 30,000 of them who go fight for the British. Because the British said, if you come fight for us, we'll set you free. And then at the end of the American Revolutionary War, you're going to have just 1 second. You're going to have them dispersed, and some of them are sent into Nova Scotia, Canada, because that was British territory, and they're going to be sent into other British territories also. Go ahead.
Well, sir. Well, not only that, man. Most people don't. Do you know what a bush ranger is?
A bush ranger.
Let me share this with you.
Go ahead.
Most people don't realize this, man. Most people don't realize this, that the country of Australia was founded in 1788, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
The modern country of Australia. What most people don't realize is this: that on the first 11 ships that left Australia in Portsmouth, England, in 1787, and arrived in Botany Bay, Sydney, in 1788, there were African Americans on board. They were a part of Australia's founding population.
Okay.
In Australian history, the most iconic figure in Australian history is the bush ranger. The very first bush ranger was an African American by the name of John Black Caesar.
Oh, okay.
And most people don't realize this.
Yeah.
And now, how do we know this? He was in the Book of Negroes. Those Nova Scotians, those African Americans who migrated to Nova Scotia.
Right.
Of course, they did the Book of Negroes. John Black Caesar is in the book. He ends up migrating to the UK. Unfortunately, the British reneged in terms of paying the blacks their pension. So many of the blacks became poor and destitute.
Right.
And they were criminals.
Right.
And the ones who became criminals were shipped off to Australia. And so when Australia was being founded as a brand new country, African Americans were actually a part of the first set of people who left England.
Right.
And actually arrived in Australia in 1788.
Okay. Excellent. All right, man. Now, what's your name? What's your first name?
My name is Professor Larry Davis. I'm a professor. I'm actually a professor of educational leadership, instructional systems design, post-higher secondary ed leadership.
Okay. Which city?
I live in Maryland.
Oh, Larry. Okay. Larry, have I met you before?
I don't think we. Well, I may have seen you a couple of times. I may have seen you at Howard University. I may have.
Okay, that's possible. I've been at Howard a couple of times.
I think.
Yeah. Well, you know my man, Dr. Greg Carr. You know my man, Dr. Greg Carr, at Howard.
I do.
Yeah, that's my man right there. Yeah, that's my man, Dr. Greg Carr. Yep. And then I know Dr. Mario Beatty also.
Okay. And but I'll say this to you one more thing. I with African Americans who are doing this type of research, I'm fortunate that I speak 5 languages.
Okay.
And so a lot of the information that I'm able to read in different languages, which gives you a completely different perspective about history. But again, I want to say this one more thing about the African American narrative.
Go ahead.
No Black American should ever be shameful of our contributions. Because I'm telling you, sir, I mean, the contributions that have been made by us are just, I'm just going to say, it's second to none.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, not only that,
incredible.
Not only that, if you read, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. But this was our land stolen from us. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet, who come from Southern Africa. The Khoisan were in North, Central, and South, well, they're South America, Central America, and North America. They were here in this land going back at least 51,700 years ago. He deals with the mound builders. He deals with Asians coming here around 3000 BC and intermixing with the Africans who are already here, and their offspring are who we call Native Americans. And then you're going to have groups of indigenous African people who are already here, who Europeans are going to rename Native Americans as well. So when you deal with Captain John Smith in 1607, Jamestown, Virginia, he says he was captured by a group of Black Indians. Well, it's because it was already African people here. This is why, so read this article. I'm gonna let you go, but read this article from Dr. Malefekete Asante called Henry Louis Gates is Wrong About African Involvement in the Slave Trade. He goes through and breaks this down. Dr. Malefekete Asante, Henry Louis Gates is wrong about African involvement in the slave trade. because he deals with how Gates tries to take exceptions to the rule and just extrapolate it all over Africa. But Gates is an apologist for Europeans, and what he tries to do is absolve Europeans of any responsibility for paying reparations. That's what Gates does. So
yeah,
So
no, Europe is. I mean, it is crystal clear that Europe basically they were. How do I put this? They basically controlled it. They controlled the partnership.
They control. Well, not only that,
no question about.
They controlled that, but not only that, who owned the shipbuilding companies? Who owned the insurance companies that took out insurance policies on the slave ships? Who owned the insurance companies? Yeah. There were over 40 insurance companies that took out insurance policies in this country on the enslaved Africans on the plantation. Yeah. You know, who had the asiento in the Spanish colonies?
Right.
Yeah. So
true. But what's so crazy to me is this. I'll say this. I just finished reading a book on Liberian American history. A Liberian professor wrote a book called Between the Cola Forest and the Salty Sea, a history of Liberia prior to 1800. Okay. And he points out that that the number of voyages that were made during the triangular slave trade were over 40,000, which is just, to me, it's unfathomable.
Okay, now when you say that
this particular,
I want to break this down. When you say that, now when you deal with the triangular trade, all of the 9 European nations or so didn't use the triangular trade as much. England is going to be the ones that use it the most, and England really are the ones that popularize this. And then as time goes on, you're going to have that triangular trade used less and less because there's a greater demand put on getting the enslaved Africans to the final destination faster. Right. So you're going to have them not use it so much. So when are you talking about the transatlantic slave trade in general, or are you talking about specifically the triangular trade?
I'm talking about the transatlantic slave trade in general, circa the early 1430s through the 1860s, which was from that roughly 400-year period. You're talking about there were over 40,000 voyages, and again, it's just really hard to kind of believe that this happened over such a long period of time. And as you well know, of the roughly 12 to 13 million people who were extracted from Africa and brought to the West, or to the U.S., to the North and South America, only 5% came to the United States.
Yeah, between
the other 95% went to Latin America.
Yeah, between 388,000 to 1.4 million on the high end. 1.4 million comes from my conversations with Professor Kabahayawatha Kamene, formerly Booker T. Coleman, and the research he's done at the Schomburg Institute. But 388,000 on the low end, 1.4 million on the high end. But a very small percentage come here. But what's going to cause a population to explode is the slave breeding process and slave breeding business, which really explodes in 1808 as well.
Right, but also too, most people don't realize that there's the basic difference between Latin American slavery and slavery in the American South is this too. That let me just say that the bullseye of the transatlantic slave trade was the West Indies, roughly 42%, 5.5 million, and also too the demographics. Roughly 2/3 of the slaves in the West Indies and Latin America were men, 1/3 were women. The average slave woman in Latin America only had 4 children, as opposed to the United States. There was sexual parity. The slave masters brought an equal number of men and women to the United States, and also to the slave woman in the American South had roughly 10 children. And so you're talking about by 1825, a quarter to 30% of all this blacks in the New World were African American. We basically were just breeding like crazy. Right.
And that's because the importation of enslaved African people was outlawed in 1808. So even though it's going to continue to a lesser extent, this caused the slave breeding business to explode. And then, and then in 1793, you have the invention of the cotton gin, and then the copies of the cotton gin, which is going to make it easier and more profitable to produce cotton, which means you need more slaves. Then in 1803, you have the Louisiana Purchase, which basically doubles the territory of the United States also. Go ahead.
And let me just say this to you too. I don't know if you have gotten a chance to kind of tour the new Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. I can say I am thrilled to death that I have one of my relatives' artifacts on display for the world to see.
Wow. Now, who's your relative? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. My grandmother. That's fine. My grandmother is a direct descendant of Nat Turner.
Oh, wow. Okay. Nat Turner executed November 11th, 1831 in Virginia. Yeah.
The Nat Turner. Yes. So and so his Bible is on display for the world to see.
That's true.
And which is pretty powerful, man. And
I think his sword is there also. Isn't his sword there also? Isn't his sword there as well?
I believe. You know what? I got a chance to go early on, and I did see the sword. I definitely saw the Bible, of course.
Yeah,
and,
I think his family, descendants. I think his descendants gave them his Bible. But I also think, because I did a presentation on Nat Turner's Rebellion. I think his sword is there also, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling.
Stuff, man, but
absolutely.
Thank you so much, and I'll send you the information about from Dr. Yang. It's about an 8-minute piece, and thanks so much for your research. All the best to you.
Yeah, thanks you too, brother.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Dr. Davis, Professor Davis. All right, thanks, brother. Hotep. Okay, peace.
I'll take care now.
All right, thank you. All right, 914-338-1375 is to call in if you have a question or comment. Whenever we have a scholar on like that, I talk to him because he was dropping some information. Okay, so absolutely. All right, so on Facebook we've got CL Tisdale's been listening to the show for years. Brother speaks 5 languages pretty good. Lanita said, wow. Erica Watson said, I'm back. Laptop Connect. Mike Onk said, I'll be right back. Terry Menendez says, what did this world do to exist, destroying the fabric of Mother Africa? Mike Onk, peace and respect to the ancestor Nat Turner. Oh yeah, yep, Nat Turner. I did a lecture. My lecture dealing with Nat Turner. You can order that if you want to from my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It's called the Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831, the Rebirth of a Nation. The Nat Turner Rebellion of 1831, the Rebirth of a Nation. All my DVD lectures are there. We have bundle packs, everything, documentaries, the Black Friday documentaries that I'm in. You can order those there also. Vernita said, yes, we had our own tribes, but we were not killing each other until the European got involved. Stop blaming us for the action of the white man. Steve Slack said, blacks in America don't understand history in America. That's true. But a lot of white Americans don't understand history either. They're flying the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia, and they think it's the Confederate flag. Okay, when you see Donald Trump supporters down in the South and they have that Confederate battle flag, they think it's the Confederate flag. They say my great granddaddy fought for this flag and my grandfather, all this stuff. Most of them did it. That's the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under the command of General Robert E. Lee, his army. That there were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag was never one of them. That's not the Confederate flag. That's the Confederate battle flag. So a lot of these white people out here flying this flag, they don't even understand history. Okay. All right. Hey, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. You're watching and listening to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. And we're broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And we're broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio, or Blog Talk Radio channel, blogtalkradio.com/The African History Network show. You can call in and listen also by phone, 914-338-1375, 914-338-1375. And if you have a question or comment, press the number 1 key to put you in queue as well. If you have a question or comment, 914-338-1375. I teach an online class called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 12-hour, 6-week online course. You can tune in from around the world. All the sessions are recorded. We do it live on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. Okay. If you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. So you can visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the course. It's only $40 for the entire course. As soon as you register, you can watch session 1 and session 2. You'll be ready for session 3, which takes place July 7th, Friday, July 7th, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we have about 12 hours of bonus content you can watch as soon as you register also. Okay, so we're in hour 2 of the show. I want to get to the second topic. First hour, we talked about Colin Kaepernick and his visit to Ghana and his message to African Americans, asking them, how can you celebrate the 4th of July? That's what Dr. Shaka Musa Barashango called it, who wrote the books African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide, book 1 and book 2. He asked the question, how could you celebrate? How can we truly celebrate independence on a day that intentionally robbed our ancestors of theirs? And we talked about Frederick Douglass as well. Go back and listen to my presentation. We have it on Facebook. Our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, is on YouTube and Blog Talk Radio. If you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and it connects you to our podcast and our YouTube channel. I did a presentation on July 4th. Frederick Douglass, John Hanson, the Black John Hanson, because he was not president. Black John Hanson was not president. There were 2 John Hansons. Need to stop spreading that myth. Throw that in the garbage can along with the fake Willie Lynch letter of 1712. Willie Lynch never historically existed. Throw that in the garbage can also. Hate to disappoint you. But I dealt with that. So check that out. Also, when we talked about Frederick Douglass, probably arguably his most famous speech, "What to the Slave" is the 4th of July. He delivered July 5th, 1852. Okay, in Rochester, New York. All right, so in the second hour here, I want to deal with dispelling some myths about slavery. I saw 2 good articles, and we do this in my online course also. Though some of you watching it are in the course, some of you have taken it, some of you have seen my presentations, things like this. So we dispel myths about slavery, deal with real history. Okay, but I saw 2 articles in the last couple of days that talk about this, so I wanted to deal with that and also do a brief overview of the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So rawstory.com had a good article that they picked up from theconversation.com, I think it is. But this is an article written by Dana Ramey Berry. Dana Ramey Berry. And she's an associate professor of history and African diaspora studies at the University of Texas at Austin. Okay, and I went through it, and it's pretty accurate. But she talks about dispelling myths about the slave trade of African people, and she talks about how there's been interest in the transatlantic slave trade in the past couple of years. You know, I think it was last year, we found out that Georgetown University, back in 1838, if I remember correctly, was involved in the selling of 272 enslaved African people to basically save Georgetown University. The Jesuit priests there did that sale. We know, if I remember correctly, it was last year, you had an African-American mother who posted a picture. She did a video that went viral about a textbook that McGraw-Hill uses. And in the textbook, it was her child's textbook. And in this textbook, it said that it referred to enslaved African people as workers from Africa. Okay. And so you have these different things that take place. We also find out Columbia University has ties to slavery as well. Okay. So the first myth that she talks about dispelling is the myth that the majority of African captives came to what became the United States. And this is not true. And we just talked about this with Professor Larry Davis also, who was so kind to call into the show. Only a little more than 300,000 captives, or 4 to 6%, came to the United States. So you're dealing with 388,000 on the low end, 1.4 million on the high end. Okay. The majority of enslaved Africans went to Brazil, followed by the Caribbean. A significant number of enslaved Africans arrived in the American colonies by way of the Caribbean, where they were seasoned and mentored into slave life, because they had, first of all, you have large plantations in the Caribbean. So some are going to stay in the Caribbean, like Haiti and Jamaica and Cuba, things like this. Cuba had these, well, see, it's important when I teach about the transatlantic slave trade. First of all, we have to deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, and how the Moors are going to set up Columbus to set sail on his 4 voyages. He's using technology. He's using nautical instruments based upon Moorish technology. The Moors introduced spherical globes and almanacs and all different types of things like this, right? So the Moors are going to introduce sugar also into Europe. They introduced cotton and they introduced sugar in the 9th, 10th centuries. And a lot of Europeans get hooked on sugar. So when Columbus is trying to find a westward route east to Asia in search of gold and spices and things like this, he's also looking for another source of sugar. He's also looking for another source of sugar. So you're going to see that sugar is going to be king before cotton is king. See, a lot of times we talk about cotton and we talk about the English involvement in the transatlantic slave trade and how cotton becomes king, and the production of cotton explodes after the cotton gin is invented about 1793, and you have copies of the cotton gin, things like this, and it makes it easier to pick the seeds out of cotton. All right, which drastically reduces the cost of producing cotton. It reduces the cost of producing cotton products, things like this. And with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the U.S. gets about 828,000 square miles of land for less than 3 cents an acre, and this increases the need. This gives more land for the U.S. to grow crops on, and some of these states have slaves, etc. Right? But if you go back and you see that you're going to have very large sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean, in South America, Brazil, things like this. And sugar is going to be king before cotton is king. So you're going to have some enslaved Africans who stay in the Caribbean. You're going to have some that come here to the U.S. also, but they have seasoned, but in the Caribbean, they're going to have seasoning plantations where they're trained to be slaves. So they spent months or years recovering from the harsh realities of the Middle Passage. Now, the Middle Passage is the leg of the triangular trade from Africa to the Americas. OK, that's the leg of the triangular trade. Once they were forcibly accustomed to slave labor, many were then brought to plantations on the American soil. All right. So myth number two, slavery lasted for 400 years. So when you look at the transatlantic slave trade in general, so there's a misconception here. So I was watching an episode of Good Times. Don't watch it very often. I know Bernadette Stannis. Shout out to Bernadette Stannis if you're watching. I usually see it each year at the African World Festival here in Detroit, third weekend in August. She played Thelma Evans. I've interviewed, if you go back in our archives, you see I've interviewed her twice. Okay. So, shout out to Bernadette Stannis. I remember an episode of Good Times. I think it was the episode where JJ brought home the report card with an A in art and C's and all the other classes. And he was just passed. They just passed him. He didn't earn those grades, but he said, "Remember, Mama, I'm the product of 400 years of oppression." So you hear a lot of people talk about 400 years. Okay. 400 years of slavery. Now, it is true that the transatlantic slave trade is from 1440, because the Portuguese are the first ones involved to get in with Prince Henry the Navigator, 1440 to 1888. Brazil was the last country to end the slave trade. So it ends in Brazil in 1888. But it's not in the U.S. from 1440 to 1888. So this is a misconception. So popular culture is rich with references to 400 years of oppression. There seems to be confusion between transatlantic slave trade, which is from 1440 to 1888, and the institution of slavery overall. Confusion only reinforced by the Bible, Genesis 15:13. Now, What I say may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness, and you can call in if you have a question or comment. 914-338-1375. 914-338-1375 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. If you're watching on Facebook, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also, okay? And if you call in with a question or comment, press the number 1 key, okay? Press the number 1 key. We'll post the number there again, all right? Now, it is a mistake, and when you talk to historians, you talk to Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, you talk to other historians, you know, Brother Booker T. Coleman from the Hidden Colors documentaries is one of my teachers. When you talk to Dr. Leonard Jeffries, you talk probably to Professor James Small, all three of them are some of my teachers, right? And you've heard me interview them numerous times. It's incorrect to refer to the Bible looking for history. It's incorrect to refer to the Bible, the Helios Biblos, the Holy Bible, is incorrect looking to the Bible for world history. World history is in world history books, okay? Religious literature and world history are two entirely different things. Religious literature and world history are two entirely different things. Now, the sooner we learn this, the better off we'll be. Now, what I say may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you never heard it before, just because you disagree with it or don't like it, does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. So world history is what happened. Religious literature is the result of what happened. World history is what happened. Religious literature is the result of what happened. So when you study the 21 Ecumenical Councils held from 325 AD with the Council of Nicaea up till about the 1860s or something like that. Okay, there were 21 Ecumenical Councils. The first Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Okay, first Council of Constantinople 381 AD. Council of Ephesus 431 AD, which is even more important than the Council of Nicaea. Council of Chalcedon 451. These ecumenical councils are historical events that shaped the way Christianity was practiced and is practiced, that shaped what was going to be left in the Bible, taken out of the Bible, what was going to be taught, what was going to be believed. Is that when you study the Council of Ephesus, 431 AD, this is where you have the creation of the, if I remember correctly, this is where you have the creation of the Theotokos. It's either that one or the Council of Chalcedon. I think it's the Council of Ephesus, because Council of Ephesus is where you have the Messiah created and you have the Theotokos created, the Mother of God. This is before the Catholic Church comes into existence. Catholic Church does not come into existence till the 11th century AD, right around 1050 AD. At this point, with the Council of Nicaea in 325, Council of Ephesus 431, it's the Eastern Orthodox Church. It's the Eastern Orthodox Church, the same Eastern Orthodox Church that Pope Celestine I in 432 AD sends a British slave into Ireland named Patrick to spread Christianity, and Patrick is fighting against the Druids, and Druid in Old Irish means he who knows. And the Druids are dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet. Okay. And what the Druids are teaching conflicts with Christianity. So you have Patrick fighting and killing thousands of Druids in the Irish people. So at this point in time, you don't have a Catholic Church. It's the Eastern Orthodox Church. But if you fast forward, if you look at and when you study the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the real fight in the Council of Nicaea was over Serapis Christos. It wasn't over Jesus the Christ. Now, what I say may go outside the circumference of some people's awareness. Just because you never heard it before or don't like it, or don't believe it, does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. First of all, the letter J didn't exist until 1630 AD. Letter J is derived from the letter I. The letter J is an I with a hook on it. It's not by accident that in your 26-character alphabet, the letter J comes after the letter I. H-I-J-K-L-M-N-O-P. That's not by accident. The letter J is derived from the letter I. If you read The Historical Origin of Christianity by Dr. Walter Williams, who I've interviewed a number of times, he's one of my teachers, Dr. Walter Williams. You go back, we have 750 some odd archive episodes of our shows. You go back and listen to them. Go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Been doing radio 7 years. I have a body of work. You can go look at it, go research it. You go right on the homepage, click on listen to podcasts of the Michael Imhotep Show. You can go listen to interviews I've done with Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Professor Kabahiawatha Kamene, Dr. Ray Hagins, Dr. Walter Williams, all of them. Professor Manu M. Pym. You go listen to all those archive episodes. But if you read The Historical Origins of Christianity by Dr. Walter Williams, chapter 9 of the book deals with the whole history of the letter J. Chapter 9 of the book deals with the whole history of the letter J. The letter J wasn't invented till 1630 AD. So in the King James Version of the Bible, and I'm not exactly sure what his real name was, whether it was IAMES, because the letter J didn't even exist then. So his real name wasn't James. Okay, when he commissions, when we'll call him James, but I'm not sure if it was an I or what, but when he commissions his version of the Bible to be written in 1600 AD and is complete in 1611, when you look at that original version, the name of the Son of God in there was not Jesus, it was Iesus. Why? Because the letter J didn't exist. And then if you go to the dictionary, go to Merriam-Webster dictionary, go online, go to merriam-webster.com, okay? Or just Google Merriam-Webster, okay? And search for Jesus. It gives you the etymology of the word. It takes you back to Yeshua, Y-E, I think they spell it Y-E-S-H-U-A, Yeshua, which is Amharic. Amharic is the ancient language of the Ethiopians because the letter J didn't exist. But if you look at, for instance, so the real fight with the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was not over Jesus Christ. It was over Serapis Christos. That's going down a whole nother lane. So I don't have time to get into that deep right now. You can go listen to the interviews I did with Dr. Walter Williams because we dealt with Serapis Christos. Serapis Christos is introduced in 320 BC by the Melkite Coptic Egyptian priests. Okay, and Serapis Christos means Christ the Savior. Serapis Christos means Christ the Savior. Go research it. You can Google Serapis. Go to Britannica.com, official website of Encyclopedia Britannica. S-E-R-A-P-I-S. Serapis. S-E-R-A-P-I-S. I'll spell it again. S-E-R-A-P-I-S. Research Serapis. If you have the pamphlet from Dr. John G. Jackson, Pagan Origin of the Christ Myth, page 8. He talks about the bishops of Serapis. If you have the book, I think it's short, short overview of history, something by H.G. Wells, the book about history by H.G. Wells. He talks about Serapis in there also. Serapis Christos, it means Christ the Savior, 320 BC. See, the term Christ comes from Christos, which is Greek, which comes from the ka rest. Ka meaning spirit, rest meaning to be rise, which is rest meaning to rise. Ka rest, K-A-R-S-T, ka rest, which is from ancient Kemet, from the Meadow Netter, ka rest. So, all right, C.O. Tisdale. All right, so we have to make a clear distinction. All right. So world history is in world history books. And when you deal with religious literature, that's religious literature. That's in religious literature books. Those are two entirely different things. And Dr. John Henry Clark, one of our great grandmaster scholar warriors, if you watch some of his lectures, if you heard some of the interviews I did with Professor Kabahiawatha Kamene, Dr. Clark was his teacher. Professor Kaba is one of my teachers. And Professor Kaba talks about how Dr. Clark always made a clear distinction in his classroom, whether he was talking about world history or religious literature, because those are two entirely different things. He always made a clear distinction. So if you look, for instance, at 1563 AD with the last when the Council of Trent ends. There were 3 councils of Trent from 1545 to 1563. So the last one ends in 1563. The Council of Trent is convened because of the Reformation led by Martin Luther in 1517, which creates a Protestant movement. And the Catholic Church is trying to deal with this because they have a mass exodus from the Catholic Church. So they're trying to reconcile with this, which brings about the Council of Trent. One of the outcomes of the Council of Trent is to recalculate when Easter should be celebrated, because Easter was celebrated about 10 days prior to the vernal equinox, which is March 20th or March 21st, which marks the first day of spring. And the reason why it was celebrated 10 days before the vernal equinox was because of a miscalculation by Sosigenes, who creates the Julian calendar, okay, for Julius Caesar. So the Julian calendar is introduced, and his calculations are off by about 11 minutes and 14 seconds. His calculations each year are off by 11 minutes, 14 seconds, approximately. So by the time 1560 comes around that time of Pope Gregory the 13th, okay, who introduces the Gregorian calendar in 1582 AD, by the time the Council of Trent comes around, the calendar is off 10 days when it comes to when to celebrate Easter. Because if you go back to the Council of Nicaea, one of the things that came out of the Council of Nicaea is when to celebrate Easter. So it coincided with the vernal equinox, the first day of spring. So the Gregorian calendar is going to fix the miscalculation of Sosigenes, who introduces the Julian calendar named after Julius Caesar. And this is the Julian calendar is introduced around 45 BC, something like that. So the Gregorian calendar is based upon how long it takes the earth to rotate around the sun. It takes 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45.51 seconds. Originally, now I've seen 45.20 seconds, something like that. It may be off a little bit, but originally it was 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 45.51 seconds. That's how long it takes the earth to rotate around the sun. That's called a solar year. That's what the calendar that we use, 365 days, that's what it's based upon. Named after Pope Gregory the 13th, who introduced that calendar, 1582 AD, based upon the decisions coming out of the Council of Trent that ends in 1563 AD. Okay, which determines when Christians celebrate Easter today. Most Christians don't even know what determines when they celebrate Easter. They look at the calendar. Oh, it's on the calendar. Oh, my pastor told me. How does your pastor know? How do they know which Sunday on the calendar to put it? Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday following the first full moon following the vernal equinox. That's what determines when Easter is celebrated, as determined coming out of the Council of Trent in 1563. Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday following the first full moon following the vernal equinox. Okay, so we have to make a clear distinction between world history and religious literature. Those are two entirely different things. We have to make a clear distinction between world history and religious literature. All right. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. You're going to put a warning label on this parental advisory. We have to put a warning label on this show. Parental advisory. This show may cause you to think outside the circumference of your own awareness. This show may cause you to think outside the circumference of your own awareness. All right, so let me continue with this. Then we'll go to the phone lines. 914-338-1375. 914-338-1375 is a call-in number. How's everybody doing tonight? How you all like this type of information? People listen. How you all like this type of information? Now, Steve said, love the knowledge, my brother. Every time I read or listen, I learn something new, like hearing a song. The more you listen, you learn a new word in the song. C.O. Tisdale said the book by Walter Williams breaks it all down. Yeah, you have to read that book two or three times, man. That book is deep. The Historical Origin of Christianity by Dr. Walter Williams. CL said too much info, brother Mike on Christianity. My grandmother is spinning in her grave. Lorenzo said, I love it. Okay. All right. Now the sister's watching. How you like this information? Okay. because I know, you know, a lot of African American women are emotionally tied to the church, you know, and that's just understanding psychology and history. Okay. Sherilyn said, love the information. All right. If you like this type of information, I'm going to post a link here once again. You can register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And you can register at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, so back to this article dealing with 4 myths about American slavery we need to stop believing. This is from rawstory.com. This is written by Dana Rami Berry, who's associate professor of history and African diaspora studies at the University of Texas, Austin. So she talks about myth number 2, slavery lasted for 400 years. And she says this is confusion is only reinforced by the Bible, Genesis 15:13. Okay. In Genesis 15:13, you don't have to grab your Bible if you want to. It says, then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. Okay. So she gives another example. She says, listen to Lupe Fiasco, hip hop artist Lupe Fiasco, who's one of the more conscious hip hop artists, because sure, mainstream hip hop artists there's not a whole lot of conscious ones. Jay-Z seems to be awakening with some of his consciousness, but there ain't a whole lot that are conscious mainstream. Lupe Fiasco, just one hip hop artist, is just one hip hop artist to refer to the 400 years in his 2011 Imagining of America Without Slavery, a song called All Black Everything. He says, and we ain't get exploited. White man ain't feared, so he did not destroy it. We ain't work for free. See, they had to employ it, built it up together, so we equally appointed. First 400 years, see, we actually enjoyed it. So she goes on to say, how then do we calculate the timeline of slavery in America? Most historians use 1619 as a starting point. 20 some odd Africans referred to as servants, indentured servants, arrived in Jamestown, Virginia on a Dutch ship. It was actually an English ship. AAregistry.com or .org has an article about August 20th, 1619. And I've seen some other sources talk about how it was actually an English ship and not a Dutch ship. But she goes on to say it's important to note, however, that they were not the first Africans on American soil. Africans first arrived in America in the late 16th century, not as slaves, but as explorers, together with Spanish and Portuguese explorers. Okay. And slavery was not unique in the United States. It is part of almost every nation's history, from Greek and Roman civilizations to contemporary forms of human trafficking. The American part of the story lasted fewer than 400 years. So basically, if you talk about first of all, yes, all nations had slavery. The slavery that Europeans inflicted upon African people was totally different. This is a dehumanizing chattel slavery, and slave for perpetuity, and your children are born into slavery also. And we know in this country, in many of the colonies, and that are later going to become states, they're going to be forbidden to read, they're forbidden to learn to write. Many slaves didn't even know the date of their birth. If you read Frederick Douglass' first autobiography, because he wrote 3, if you read his first one, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, Frederick Douglass talks about, now he wrote this when he was either 27 or 28 years old, because he didn't know the exact date or year of his birth. He knew he was either born 1817 or 1818. His assumed birth date is February 14th. His assumed birth date, because he didn't know the date of his birth. But he talked about in here, most slaves didn't know most enslaved Africans did not know the date of their birth. And he said the best they could estimate it was based upon the time of planting crops. He said, I do not remember to have ever met a slave who could tell of his birthday. They seldom come nearer to it than planting time, harvest time, cherry time, springtime, or fall time. Okay. And he said, a want of information concerning my own was a source of unhappiness to me, even during childhood. So he's saying that they basically estimated their birth date based upon the time of the year that crops are planted, based upon seasons, things like this. And he talked about the impact that it had upon him, where he, even though he was enslaved as a child, he runs away from the plantation in 1838 when he's 20 years old, approximately 20 years old. But even as a child, he had white friends who were free. You know, white children who were friends of his, even though he was a slave. And he said they knew their birthday, they could celebrate their birthday, but he didn't know, and it left the emptiness in him also. Okay, so. Professor Berry goes on to say one of the best known of these African conquistadors was Estebaniko, who traveled through the Southeast from present-day Florida to Texas. As far as the institution of chattel slavery, the treatment of slaves as property in the United States, if we use 1619 as the beginning and the 1865 13th Amendment as the end, then it lasted 246 years, not 400. Okay. All right. Now here's an addendum to it. Okay. A couple of addendums. First of all, get the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. Okay. And you've heard me interview him about 10 times. All those interviews are archived. This is one of the books we use in the online course. The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. All right, number one. His book has 713 footnotes. He deals with thousands of years of African history and African American history. And he deals with the African presence in this country we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years, at least 51,700 years. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. Okay. And he talks about this. He talks about the mound builders. He talks about the African presence here. Okay. So those who are in my course, you've heard me talk about this. Those who've taken it before or have heard interviews I've done with Dr. David Imhotep, you know about this. Okay. And not only that, African people were here before anybody else was here, even before Native Americans came to existence. Okay. Now, I don't know if Professor Berry knows this. She didn't mention it here in the article. Don't know if she knows it or not, but I'm sharing it with you. Okay. So, and you know, there've been times where there are PhDs who I've had to correct and say, wait, hold on. Because people like to say, oh, well, Europeans been doing that since they brought us in. No, they've been doing that since they got here. We were already here. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened. Don't misunderstand me. Because you have some people jump off the deep end and say, oh, it never happened, blah, blah, blah. No, they're damn fools. No, transatlantic slave trade happened. Don't disrespect our ancestors with that type of nonsense, okay? But we were here for tens of thousands of years before the transatlantic slave trade started, okay? We were here for tens of thousands of years before the transatlantic slave trade started. Okay, something is freezing up here. All right. I wanted to show you Dr. David Imhotep. Okay, so you have this with the Khoisan who are here, who are the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They're in South America. They're in Central America also. At least 70% of the people Columbus encounters on his 4 voyages were African people. At least 70% of the people Columbus encounters on his 4 voyages were African people. Okay. And also, Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. We need to stop lying to our children, telling them that Columbus discovered America. Okay. He wasn't lost, because when you studied Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay and you study Professor Kabahaya Walter Kamene, they talk about, no, we don't think Columbus was lost. We think he knew exactly where he was going. We think he knew exactly what he was doing. Okay. A school child knows, a 3rd grader knows that you can tell which direction you're going in by where the sun rises and where the sun sets each morning. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. Okay. So you can tell which direction you're going in by where the sun rises and sets each morning. Okay. So, and he also had Moors navigating his ship. So no, we don't think he was lost. We think he knew exactly where he was going. I'll be damned. I don't know why Microsoft Word is not working while it's shutting down. Okay, so and then you're going to have Asians who come to this land around 3000 BC, and the Africans who are already here and Asians are going to intermix, and their offspring are who we call Native Americans. Their offspring are who we call Native Americans. Dr. David Imhotep deals with this in his book and thoroughly deals with this. That's why we use this in the course, okay? And you don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in the course or anything. We use these for reference, all right? Okay, so then also you're going to have Juan Garrido. Now, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., who I disagree with on some things, but I read Dr. Gates' articles, and I admit he writes some good articles. Okay, I read his articles. He does write some good articles. I've talked about this before. He talks about Juan Garrido, who was a conquistador, who comes here with the conquistadors, Ponce de Leon, Juan Ponce de Leon, 1513. And he talks about how Juan Garrido was the first person of African descent we know by name. First person of African descent we know by name. Juan Garrido, 1513, in Florida with the Spanish conquistadors. Now, what she didn't talk about, and I'm sure Professor Berry knows this, but what she didn't talk about, and I want to share with you, is that the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory we today call South Carolina in the 1520s. In the 1520s. Now, this is before South Carolina becomes a British colony, becomes part of the United States. It's under Spanish control. Okay. You have the British colonies along the East Coast, the 13 British colonies, right? But you have African people enslaved in the land we today call the United States, going back 100 years before Jamestown, Virginia, August 20th, 1619, when you count the Spanish colony also. Okay. But even then, you getting about 346 to 350 years and not 400 years. All right. So if you count the British colonies, you're talking about 246 years from 1619 to 1865. All right. So no 400 years. Okay. And yes, the Willie Lynch speech is a fraud. Throw the Willie Lynch speech in the garbage can. Their words in the Willie Lynch speech that didn't even exist in the 20th century, like self-refueling. And you research Professor Manu Ampim. You can listen to the interviews I've done with Professor Manu Ampim, A-M-P-I-M. Okay. Professor Manu Ampim. He's written 3 essays, Death to the Willie Lynch speech. And he goes through and breaks this stuff down. Willie Lynch never historically existed. When you study world history books, they don't refer to a Willie Lynch in the 18th century. Language structure and words that are used in that speech didn't exist in the early 18th century, 1712. That speech was written by Dr. Kwabena Ashanti in 1970. He's come out and admitted it, and Professor Manu Ampim outed him, and he contacted Professor Manu Ampim about it and admitted it. And Professor Manu Ampim wrote a short book about it also, but I've interviewed him. You can go check that out. These are some of the things we deal with in the class because we have to dispel these myths. Okay, so there is no Willie Lynch syndrome. Willie Lynch never historically existed. Okay, and in the Willie Lynch letter, he allegedly said if you use these methods, they will keep the slaves mentally enslaved for 300 years, something like that, right? So 2012 came around and there were people actually sitting around waiting for the Willie Lynch syndrome to dissipate. It never existed. 300 years later in 2012, people were saying, okay, so this is going to be the year that the programming ends. No, the programming only works if you really buy into it. The programming, white supremacy is a false concept that has real consequences and repercussions. For white supremacy to work to its fullest extent, you have to believe it. For white, it's like the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz was a midget manipulating technology behind a curtain to make himself appear much larger and more powerful than he actually was. When Toto pulled the sheet back and exposed the fraud of the wizard, they saw it was a dwarf. Willie Lynch never historically existed. There is no Willie Lynch syndromes. We need to stop perpetuating that myth. Power is the ability to define and shape reality and have other people accept your definition of reality as if it were their own. Power is the ability to define and shape reality and have other people accept your definition of reality as if it were their own. Power coming from the Latin word potere, meaning to be able, Dr. Wade Nobles correctly teaches us. So on page 14 of his book, Dr. David Imhotep deals with evidence found in Allendale County, South Carolina in 2004 by Dr. Albert Goodyear, which shows an African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. 13 different disciplines thoroughly documented the African presence in this country going back at least 51,700 years ago, before Native Americans came into existence. Before Native Americans came into existence, this was our land stolen from us. This is something we have to understand. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened, but you have to understand the chronology of history. And this is one of the problems with dealing with the transatlantic slave trade episodically. You can't deal with it as an episode in history. You have to deal with it chronologically. And this is one of the things we deal with in the online course that I teach. We deal with ancient Kemet. We deal with the Khoisan. We deal with a chronology of history. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, and Europe coming out of the Dark Ages, trying to rebuild themselves, trying to seek mineral wealth and rebuild Europe, and also seek a labor force as well. So now this is Dr. Albert Goodyear here. Okay, 2004, there was an article from ScienceDaily.com, which is a scientific journal. 2004, 13 years ago. How many people heard about this article? New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. ScienceDaily.com, November 18, 2004. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Okay. So in this article, here's a synopsis of it. It says radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age, So what happens is when these archaeological discoveries happen, and they happen all the time. You just had a big one, April 26, 2017, Mastodon skeleton found in San Diego, and the paleontologists are saying that it was smashed by humans. And this dates back 130,000 years ago, smashed by humans, not other animals. And if this is true, this puts a human presence in North America 100,000 years at least before the oldest discovery, which was the Clovis culture in New Mexico, which dates back about 13,000 years ago. Okay, and they're talking about modern man, Homo sapiens, 130,000 years ago in San Diego. All the news outlets have stories about this. I talked about this in our online course, but you can go back and go to Facebook, go to YouTube. We have the broadcast there. Then in June of 2017, you had a big discovery in Morocco. They found now in San Diego, they're not sure if it's modern man or not exactly sure, but talking to David Imhotep, he said, no, that's going to be Homo sapiens. If we go and look at Morocco, and I have the articles here because I teach, I deal with this. If we look at Morocco, and I got articles all over the place. So this is the file folder for the class. We do a PowerPoint presentation, all this stuff, but here's the file folder for the class. I'll give you some of these articles. I'll give you a couple of names of some of these articles here. I think I have them in this one here. But in Morocco in June 2017, another huge discovery. They discovered skeletons of modern man, Homo sapiens, that date back between 300,000 and 350,000 years ago. 300,000, 350,000 years ago. Okay. And they talked about how the oldest, skeletons of modern man they had prior to this dated back only 195,000 years ago. So here you have them, and that was in Ethiopia. That was in Ethiopia. Here you have in Morocco a discovery in June. All the major news outlets had this: New York Times, Washington Post, NBC News, Discovery Channel's website, Scientific American. Go research this. And these two discoveries were written about in the Journal of Nature. The Journal of Nature. That's where the findings were posted. NBCnews.com had this article. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. And this is about the discovery in Morocco. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. NBCnews.com. And then NBC had an article about the Mastodon skeleton. Mastodon bone findings. Mastodon, Mastodon bone findings could upend our understanding of human history. Okay. So the deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets. The more research they do, the older we get. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. All right. And they keep having to push dates back. They keep having, when these archaeological discoveries come out, and if you read some of this, right? If you read some of these articles, they say that, for instance, in the one with the Mastodon skeleton, if you look at that one, I'm going to go to this one quickly here. If you look at that one, Mastodon bone findings could upend our understanding of human history. They say paleontologists have dug up a 130,000-year-old Mastodon skeleton. That's a prehistoric animal, precursor to the elephant. Okay. Mastodon skeleton that looks like it was smashed apart by humans, but they found it in America where people were not supposed to have arrived for another 100,000 years. How could that have happened? The researchers say they think early humans may have come to America much, much earlier than anyone ever thought. You think? They suggest that other scientists start looking for evidence of people in places they never bothered looking before. They suggest that other scientists start looking for evidence of people in places they never bothered looking before. That was in April. Then in June, you have the discovery coming out of Morocco of skeletons of Homo sapiens, modern man, that date back between 300,000 and 350,000 years ago. The deeper they dig, the blacker the planet gets, the more research they do, the older we get. They keep having to push dates back. Okay. Juvenile had a song, Back That Thing Up. They keep having to back that thing up when all these new archaeological discoveries happen. Okay. So there's another myth that all Southerners own slaves. All Southerners did not own slaves. All Southern whites did not own slaves, right? Roughly 25% of all Southerners own slaves. The fact that 1/4 of the Southern population were slaveholders is still shocking to many. Okay, still shocking to many. All right, and Malcolm taught us the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power because they control the minds of the masses. So Professor Dana Ramey Berry gives the example of the state of Texas, right? Lone Star state of Texas. And she says when Texas was when it established statehood, the Lone Star state had a shorter period of Anglo-American chattel slavery than other southern states. Only 1845 to 1865, because Spain and Mexico had occupied the region for almost one half of the 19th century, with policies that either abolished or limited slavery. Because, and if you look at Florida was Spanish territory up until 1821, and Spain had abolished slavery. Okay, so the Underground Railroad does not begin until about 1830. Before the Underground Railroad starts, a lot of enslaved Africans around Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi, things like this, the states around Florida, a lot of them were run away into Florida because Florida was free territory. And this leads to the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And Native Americans being kicked off their land, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians being kicked off their land in southeastern United States, including Florida, okay, and sent out west over 1,000 miles out west in the Western Territory, especially Oklahoma, was known as the Trail of Tears, because the U.S. wanted that land to grow crops, grow cotton, things like this, and more land to have slaves. But one of the reasons why this was that white supremacist hero of Donald Trump, President Andrew Jackson, who signed the Indian Removal Act of 1830, okay, who was a slave owner also. One of the reasons they did is because a lot of enslaved Africans were running away into they were running away into Florida as well, okay, and you had the Florida Seminoles there also, okay, but it becomes prior to 1821, it was Spanish territory. Then it becomes U.S. territory, okay. So 1845 to 1865, you have in Texas, they have a shorter period of what she calls Anglo-American slavery or Anglo-Saxon slavery. And Anglo-Saxons are two Germanic people that go into England. England is named after Anglos. Okay. They go into Ireland. They kill a lot of the Celtic people or Celtic people, right? And these are two groups of Germanic people. You have the Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Lombards, the Picts, the Alans, the Vandals, the Visigoths. They had been fighting each other for hundreds of years. But the Anglos and the Saxons, they go into England. Okay. And in 1607, their descendants come to the British colonies, set up the British colonies. That's why Europeans are often referred to as Anglo-Saxons. It's referring to the descendants of two groups of Germanic people who were also collectively called barbarians, who go into England, and England is named after Anglo. Okay, so if I remember correctly, they go into Ireland in 5th century AD, if I remember correctly. Okay, so she talks about how still the number of people impacted by wealth and income inequality is staggering. By 1860, the state of Texas enslaved population was 182,566 by the year 1860, but slaveholders represented 27% of the population and controlled 68% of the government positions and 73% of the wealth. Okay, so by 1860 in the state of Texas, now this is on the eve of the Civil War. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln wins the presidency November 6, 1860. South Carolina is going to secede from the Union December 20th, 1860, the first state to secede from the Union. By February 1st of 1861, you're going to have 6 other states that follow. And then the Civil War is going to start April 12, 1861. Okay, so by 1860, Texas enslaved population was 182,566, but slaveholders represented 27% of the total population, right? And slaveholders control 68% of the government positions, and they control 73% of the wealth in the state of Texas. She goes on to say these are astonishing figures, but today's income gap in Texas is arguably more stark, with 10% of tax filers taking home 50% of the income. Okay. All right. So how's everybody doing? Hey, you can give us a call. We're going to go to, what I have to do is start up another Facebook Live broadcast because we're going to lose this one here in 7 minutes. You can give us a call, 914-338-1375. Press the number 1 key to put you in queue to bring you on the air, 914-338-1375. Press the number 1 key to put you in queue to bring you on the air. So we're talking about some myths about slavery. We started out talking about Colin Kaepernick and his travel to Ghana during the 4th of July and his message to African Americans. How can you celebrate somebody else's Independence Day or somebody else's independence when our ancestors were deprived of theirs? So we talked about that. And right now we're dealing with some myths about the enslavement of African people as well. And this all ties into some of the things that we talk about in the online course that I teach: ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And this is a 12-hour, 6-week online course that I teach. All the sessions are recorded. You can watch it from around the world. You can tune in from around the world. The classes are live on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We deal with some of this information in the course and a lot more. So you can go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And if you want to register for the online course, you can do it there. It's only $40. For the full course, as soon as you register, you can watch session 1 and session 2. You'll be ready for the class Friday. And we have a lot of bonus content there also for you to watch as well. A lot of bonus content also. Okay. All right. And like I said, you have to deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, and the connection between the Moors and Columbus, Christopher Columbus as well, Cristobal Colon. Okay. Now, myth number 4 about slavery. And then on the other side of the break, we're going to come up on the break here. Other side of the break, we'll get to questions also on the other side of the break here. Okay. Myth number 4 about slavery. Slavery was a long time ago. All right. So African Americans have been free in this country we call the United States for less time than we were enslaved for 246 years, from 1619 to 1865, free for basically 152 years. OK. And she said, which means that most Americans are only 2 or 3 generations away from slavery. This is not a long time ago. Over this same period of time, however, former slaveholding families have built their legacies on the institution of slavery and generated wealth that African Americans have not had access to because enslaved labor was forced, segregation maintained wealth disparities, and overt and covert discrimination limited African American recovery efforts. Okay, you can read more about this. Check out the article. Here are 4 myths about American slavery we need to stop believing. Here are 4 myths about American slavery we need to stop believing. And we dispel a lot of these myths and a lot of others here at the African History Network, and also in the online course that I teach as well. Okay, so let me see, how is this coming up? What are we doing here? Okay, so it's still broadcasting. All right. So, okay, we're coming up on a break here. We'll post the link here again on our Facebook fan page, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, if you want to register for our online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of African history, African American history, and it's information blow you away. Provide a lot of sources. We do a slide presentation, have video clips, articles, book references, a lot of information there. Okay, all right. So we're gonna go to, let's see here, go to Malcolm X, because we have I got to start up a new. We only have 2 hours for the broadcast when I broadcast through Crowdcast on Facebook. So I got to start up a new broadcast here. So those on Facebook, you can check back in a couple minutes here, and we'll have a new broadcast up and running. Hey, you listen to the African History Network show right here on the Blog Talk Radio Network, and also on Facebook, our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. You can go back and watch this broadcast also. Okay. I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, and we'll be back on Facebook in a few minutes here. All right. So, hey, how's everybody doing? Hey, welcome back to the African History Network show. This is part 2, the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. Thursday, July 6, 2017. Thursday, July 6, 2017. This is part 2 of the show, and we are broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio as well. blogtalkradio.com/the African History Network show, blogtalkradio.com/the African History Network show. And we should be on Facebook Live in a minute here also for part 2 of the broadcast as well. Okay. So we're wrapping up our discussion dealing with myths about slavery in America. Mainly myths about slavery in America. And we talked about the article from rawstory.com July 3rd, 2017. Here are 4 myths about American slavery we need to stop believing. And this is by Professor Dana Ramey Berry, Associate Professor of African and African American Studies. Let's see, let me get a correct credentials here. Associate Professor of History and African Diaspora Studies, University of Texas at Austin. Okay, rawstory.com had this article, so we dealt with that in part 1. And then there's an article from history.com as well. What the hell? There's an article from history.com also from called 5 Myths About Slavery. Now, history.com is the official website of the History Channel, and you've heard me talk about history.com a lot. They have a lot of good information there. Okay, so we're back live on Facebook. Okay, and the sound is good. All right, and welcome to those on Facebook live, also watching us on Facebook. This is part 2 of the broadcast. All right, so we're going to post the information here, and you can share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. This is part 2. So we started out talking about Colin Kaepernick in Ghana, and Colin Kaepernick asking African Americans, how could you celebrate the 4th of July Independence Day when it was robbing our ancestors of their independence. Then we started talking about myths about slavery. And we're getting ready to get into our conversation about the East St. Louis Race Riot of 1917 here in just a minute. If you have a question or comment, give us a call, 914-338-1375, 914-338-1375. Press the number 1 key to put you in queue so we can bring you on the air. If you have a question or comment, 914-338-1375. Okay. So this last myth I'll deal with, there were Irish slaves in the American colonies. No, there were not. Historian Liam Hogan has written, quote, there is unanimous agreement based on overwhelming evidence that the Irish were never subjected to perpetual hereditary slavery in the colonies based on notions of race. The enduring myth of Irish slavery, which most often surfaces today in service of Irish nationalists and white supremacist causes, has roots in the 17th and 18th centuries, the 1600s and 1700s, when Irish laborers were derogatorily called, quote unquote, white slaves. The phrase would later be employed as propaganda by the slave-owning South about the industrialized North, along with false claims that life was harder for immigrant factory workers than for slaves, okay, enslaved African people. Now, the truth is, large numbers of indentured servants did immigrate from Ireland to the British colonies of North America, where they provided a cheap labor force for planters and merchants, plantation owners, things like this, who were eager to exploit this cheap labor. Though most crossed the Atlantic willingly, some Irish men and women, including criminals, as well as simply the poor and vulnerable, were sentenced to indentured servitude in Ireland and forcibly shipped to the colonies to carry out these services. Okay. Call-in number is 914-338-1375. We only have like about 10 more minutes left in the 914-338-1375. We only have like 10 minutes more left in the Blog Talk Radio broadcast, but we'll still be broadcasting on Facebook live. Okay. All right. Only about 10 more minutes left that you can call in, I should say, on Blog Talk Radio. If you're already on listening to Blog Talk by phone, you'll still be able to listen. If you're listening to Blog Talk by internet, it's going to stop the live broadcast in 10 minutes, but you can watch us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. Okay, so So you're going to have most Irish who cross the Atlantic, they're going to cross willingly. You're going to have some sentenced to indentured servitude in Ireland and forcibly shipped to the British colonies in North America, okay, to carry out their indentured servitude sentences, which are usually for periods of between 5 to 7 years. But indentured servitude, by definition, came nowhere close to chattel slavery. Indentured servitude, by definition, came nowhere close to chattel slavery. For one thing, it was indentured servitude was temporary. All but the most serious felons were freed at the end of their contracts. Okay. The colonial system also offered more lenient punishment for disobedient servants than slaves, and allowed servants to petition for early release if their masters mistreated them. Okay. They allowed the servants to petition for early release if their masters mistreated them. Okay, you couldn't do that with slavery, enslavement of African people. Most importantly, indentured servitude was not hereditary. Children of indentured servants were born free. Slaves' children were the property of their owners. Slaves' children were the property of their owners. You were enslaved for perpetuity here in the U.S. Okay, it's going to start out as indentured servitude here, those 20 some odd Africans, but it's going to transition to indentured servitude. And also, you're going to have Europeans controlling all aspects of industries surrounding slavery in this country, also including insurance companies. There were over 40 insurance companies that took out slave policies on enslaved African people as well. Okay. All right, let's go to the phone lines. Caller in the 504 area code. You have a question or comment, or just listen to the show? Call in the 504 area code.
Yeah, I'm just listening on this show.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
And I've been talking heavily about this.
Okay.
Having the conscience about this. I'm 29 years old and I'm a veteran of the Army.
Okay.
What do we need to do to reassert ourselves in that position? Because I was listening to Wesley Muhammad, good brother. I learned a lot from him, and it's kind of like just sent a wave to me. So what do we need to do as a people to, as far as me, as far as for what I can control, as far as my community, what should I have to do? What do I need to do in order to have that power movement implemented, but without, really casting out? Like, what do we have to do? Because I constantly hear the narrative day in and day out, and it's frustrating coming from war to deal with war.
Which narrative do you constantly hear day in and day out? Which narrative?
The narrative of, just the narrative of what you're talking about, white slaves in Ireland and things like that. And the Irish getting the proverbial white card, and black people weren't the first to slaves, and you can't really always focus it on just the color.
Okay.
I understand the genetic. I understand the genetic threat that we are, and I understand that to the T. But it's like trying to be able to get that over. Yeah, I'm just trying to get that over.
Explain it to people so that they understand.
Really wants to learn.
You're talking about trying to explain to people so they understand?
Yes.
Okay. Well, number one, you can start with yourself. So when you are explaining this information to people, you'll be able to understand it in a way that they can understand it. Number one. Number two, work with the people in your family. Share this information with people in your family. You have people tune into this show. Follow us on Facebook, the African History Network. Share this information with people in your family. Keep in mind that everybody's not going to get this information this lifetime. That's the first thing that you have to really understand. Harriet Tubman said it best. She said, "I freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed 1,000 more if they had only known that they were slaves." So work with people who want to learn and want to do something. Everybody, there are going to be people in your family who will shun away from you because they don't want to hear this information. So eventually they may get it. Some of them may not get it till next lifetime. Join an organization in your area of similarly minded people that are doing positive things in the community. that you feel that you can really ally with some people and get some things accomplished. Do you have any children?
Right. No, sir, I don't.
Okay.
Another thing, the reason why I asked this is because I lost my mom to pancreatic cancer. I was an adopted child.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And just the environment in which I'm around because it's heavily mixed.
Okay.
It's very difficult to kind of matriculate and find brothers with like minds because it seems to me as if, just like you said, like people will discredit the information. I'm not really worried about it, getting the fact that how much that this information is crucial to the development and the resurrection of us as Black people.
Right. Well, if you're in a if you're in a heavily mixed area, first people have to understand their history first, because if they're operating under the premise that I'm mixed, and a lot of times what happens is people of African descent who have mixed ancestry, they have one white parent or something like that, it can give them a false sense of reality if they are accepted by that white family and they don't understand white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works.
No, but see, the thing is with me, I was adopted by a Black family, and my mom instilled. She started to, at 12 years old, she started to slowly but surely instill that into me. Right. But I mean, as a kid and stuff like that, not really thinking about it heavily. But once I got to high school and I started to see a lot of the things that she said that would affect me as being a young Black man. Right. And now, after being into an all brown skin country for a cause that really I don't support, and coming back home and seeing the waves of violence towards Black people is very disheartening, and it's something that I've been conscious about for the past 5 years since being back home. But trying to elaborate that consciousness to a lot of in this day and age in this society is very, very difficult. So
which country were you in? Like, which brown? You said you're in a brown.
I was in Iraq in 2010 and in Afghanistan in 2013. Okay. And it's something that a veteran had said during the Philando Castile verdict. He said that as a veteran coming home from war, I don't want to hear about war on my people coming home from a war. Right. Of a war that really makes no sense. So it's been a conscious thing, and it's gotten to the point where like some of my friends have like disowned me and stuff like that, and trolled me on Facebook, knowing that I carry, knowing me as a person, how intelligent I am, especially in this situation. So like I just want to question this because I've been following y'all. I've been following this page for years now, and I'm always looking in. And when you sent that number, I was like, "Oh man, I'm excited."
Now, what's your name?
So much questions I want to ask.
What's your name?
Tyrone.
Tyrone. Which city are you in, Tyrone?
I'm actually in Kenner. It's a little city right outside, outside of New Orleans.
Okay, out of New Orleans. Okay. Oh well, you got a history down there, man. Yeah. The Confederate statues in the Confederacy, man, in New Orleans, Louisiana. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right, man. Keep listening. We got to run. Keep listening. Okay. Keep listening. Okay. All right, thanks, brother. All right. Okay, guys, on Blog Talk, you got like 60 seconds to call in. You can call in and listen by phone on Blog Talk. You can ask questions. 914-338-1375.
60 seconds.
914-338-1375 is the call-in number. 914-338-1375. Okay. So if you want to call in and listen by phone or call in with questions, you got like 30 seconds to call in and do that. If you have a question or comment, press the number 1 key to put you in queue so we can bring you on the air. 914-338-1375 is the call-in number. If you're listening by internet through Blog Talk Radio, you'll be able to continue listening on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, or call in and listen by phone, 914-338-1375. 914-338-1375. Okay. All right. On Facebook, Vivian, how you doing, Vivian?
10 seconds.
We'll go to Sonia. How you doing, Sonia? We're going to go to the phone line in just a minute here. Looks like we have a caller. We'll get these calls here in the 443 area code, 610 area code, 210 area code. Then we'll get into the East St. Louis riot. of 1917. Want to let people know quickly. Register if you like the type of information we share with you at the African History Network. I'm the founder of the African History Network, Michael Imhotep, for those just tuning in. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a recommended reading list of books. We have hundreds of video clips there you can watch. Click on the YouTube banner, watch videos from the African History Network right at the top. You can listen to audio podcasts of these shows, over 750 audio podcasts that I've done. You can order my DVD lectures. That helps support us, helps us stay on the air because there's a lot of work. Seriously. I have about over 30 lectures there. We have the 2 new bundle packs. We have the Reclaiming the African Mind bundle pack, 6 of my latest DVD lectures, 6 DVDs for only $50. That's right on the homepage of our website. Also, you can order, have a bundle pack of 23 of my DVD lectures for $150. It's regularly close to about close to $300. 23 of my DVD lectures there. That's right on the homepage, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with some of the information we've been talking about tonight and a lot more. We deal with thousands of years of history, thousands of years of African history, African-American history. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course. We do it live on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can tune in around the world, and you can. All the sessions are recorded, so if you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. And as soon as you register for the course, it's only $40 for the online course. As soon as you register, you can watch session 1 and session 2. Okay, and we have 12 hours of bonus content there also that you can watch as well. And you'll be ready for Friday's class. Okay. All right. Let's go to the phone lines here. Let me get this. Okay. Call in the 443 area code. Do you have a question or comment, or just listen to the show? Call in the 443 area code.
Hey, how you doing, bud?
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing, sir?
You all right? How you doing? Tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Yes, sir. My name's Dutch. I'm calling from Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, Baltimore.
And
okay,
I was invited. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was invited to your podcast, and man, I'm extremely impressed, man.
Oh, thanks.
You know, I'm extremely impressed. I will be trying to find ways to stay in touch with you. I'm trying to lock this page in. Well, I'm going to lock this page in.
Yeah, do that.
Man, I'm telling you, bro, look, what you're doing is beautiful, man. And I got to give a big shout out to my brother Perry Bailey, because he's the one who put me on to you, because I guess he must have knew that we was on the same wavelength.
Okay, Perry Bailey. Okay, shout out to Perry.
Man.
Okay.
I'm in Baltimore. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, man, and I love my people. You know what I'm saying? I love my people. I know who the original man is. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
right.
And if we can get each other to look at each other like the gods and the goddesses and the queens and kings that we are, man.
Yes.
How much greater will we be?
Absolutely.
You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, like just in Baltimore, my little city, man. In my little city, man, you got so many beautiful black brothers and sisters, man. It's just like, they don't even know to call themselves beautiful, man.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right. Exactly.
And this the little time that I watched, man, I was impressed that fast. I was impressed.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, all those people, man, you can tell them go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have a free audio podcast they can listen to, like this show will be podcasted. We have video clips they could watch. I deal with a number of different subjects. I deal with current events, history. I deal with the image. I deal with how images that we see impact the way we think, feel, act, and behave, and how images are tied to us hating ourselves also. How the media is tied into that as well. Exactly. So, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you have been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So the reason why in Baltimore, Detroit, you have African Americans who hate themselves, don't think they're beautiful, is because they have bought into white supremacy and racism. A lot of this nonsense fed to us through the media. Okay. And it's designed to help control us and destroy us. Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay, brother. Thanks for calling in, man. Keep listening. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook, and lock us in on Blog Talk and listen to our podcast, and go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com also. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Keep listening. Keep listening. All right. Okay. So let's get this other caller, 610 area code. Okay, call in the 610 area code. Tell us your name, where you're calling from. Call in the 610 area code. Are you listening, or did you have a question, or just listen to the show? Call in the 610 area code. Do you have a question, or just listening to the show?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay.
Hey, first of all, I'd like to thank you, brother, for what it is you're doing as far as getting information out there to our people, because because scriptures even talk about that our people are dying for lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And it's that knowledge of self and the knowledge of God that we are suffering from.
Yes.
To bear witness to this truth, that we can look around the country, looking at our youth, the way they're murdering, killing each other, without even a thought, just pulling a gun out, not even seeing each other as being brothers or sisters. I called because my heart, I've been in this since I was 15. I say 13.
Okay.
My mother had always had us listen to literature, black literature. And then I was introduced to Malcolm X teaching, Marcus Garvey, and many other prolific black leaders who contribute a lot to our world. But what's been laying heavily on my heart lately is I love the fact that the knowledge of who we are is being projected by your show and your podcast. But wouldn't it be more sufficient if we could build a community based on the principles that we're teaching?
Right.
Therefore, once we build a community, we can build a city. And that city turns into a nation, that nation turns into a country. And then from that point on, we won't have to teach our children anything about our history, because it will become a way of life, the way the Jewish people do it.
When you talk about,
look what happened. Look what they have created. I mean, they had created a world of their own. They own the World International Banks, so on. I'm looking at Africa right now, who's picking up where Muammar Gaddafi left off at.
Right.
And the reason why they murdered him, because that would set black people on a course as being the world power. And this is something they didn't want to see. Right. Nor do they ever want to see, because they know who we are. Right. See, the Bible talks about Eden. And if you understand the name Africa that was given by the Romans, Africa, original name was called Alikabum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. You know what I mean?
You're talking about
but it was also called
Alkebulan.
Akibum.
That's one of the names. Alkebulan is actually Arabic. Just so people understand that Al, A-L, that prefix is an Arabic prefix. Alkebulan is actually Arabic. But go ahead.
Right. But it was also called the Garden of Eden.
Okay. Who called it the Garden of Eden?
And that is, if you go online and research it, it was called many names. That was just one of the names. The many names. But if you look at or go online and put Africa original name, it brings up the several names that Africa was called, actually was named. Because but one of the names is the Garden of Eden.
Because what happened was, when they set up the state of Israel, one of the places they looked at putting it originally was in Uganda, because they thought that Uganda was the real life Garden of Eden, because you see humanity starting in Central Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania area. So they originally looked at putting the state of Israel in Uganda, because they thought that was the real life Garden of Eden. Go ahead.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole continent is Eden. Because you think about it, there's no other place that has, I mean, look at the stories, the fabricated stories. You know, whoever wrote the scriptures and everything, they did their best they could to try to interpret, you know, hieroglyphics and everything. There's no other place on this planet that has, it says, God asked man, he said, till the earth and subdue it. There's everything every country on this planet needs is right there in the continent of Africa.
Right.
And that was planned by God himself, because that was called the garden. That was Eden. That was the place before the Bible came into existence, because before the Bible even came, or the Quran or the Torah came into existence, we were.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why my brother and I, you know, I have brothers in my family with different faiths and everything, and they say, well, what are you claiming? I say, I claim God as my faith. I don't need a religion to define who I am, because religion was made by man. I say, and that's why Satan came into your religion and divided your family, and that's why your whole family is divided up. Whether you're Christian, Muslim, no matter what you are, you're divided and conquered people. Just like as a black man in America, we're not in America, but throughout the world, we're a conquered and divided people. Well, it is our divine unity.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Our divine unity. Go ahead and finish your thought.
That will solidify all our problems.
Right. Well,
without this unity.
Mm-hmm. Without this unity, go ahead. Go ahead. Without this unity, go ahead.
Go ahead, brother.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now I want you to finish your thought. I thought you were finished, but go ahead and finish your thought. Without this unity, what?
Without our unity, we will not survive.
Right. Now, you know, we have to keep in mind, historically, African people did not have religion. We had spiritual systems. Spiritual systems are different than religion. So historically, we did not have religion. We had spiritual systems. And to put it very simply, spirituality teaches you how to think. Religion tells you what to think. Spirituality teaches you how to think. Religion tells you what to think. So also when you deal with Al-Kibalan is an Arabic word. We did not have one word for the continent of Africa. We named different regions of it. When you deal with the word Africa, that comes from the Afri, A-F-R-I. Okay, so Publius Cornelius Scipio was a Roman general, and you read about him during the battles of Carthage, during the Punic Wars. But when you study him, his family's last name was not Africanus, it was Scipio. He's going to take the surname Africanus after he conquers a territory in Africa, which was Carthage. After he conquers that territory, he takes that surname Africanus. Africanus in Latin means belonging to Africa. So if you read Cassell's Latin English Dictionary, 2002 edition, page 11, in the entry for Afir, A-F-E-R, it gives you the definition of Africanus. Africanus means belonging to Africa. And when you look at the Columbia Encyclopedia for Publius Cornelius Scipio, and it's online. If you go to encyclopedia.com, you should be able to reference the Columbia Encyclopedia and search for Publius Cornelius Scipio. It tells you that he took his surname after the name of the area that he conquered. Okay, so Africa, just so people historically understand this, Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio. He took his surname after the name of the area that he conquered. Now, the Afri, the prefix Afri refers to the Afri, who are a group of Black African people in Algeria and Tunisia. And they're still there today. And Tunisia used to be called Carthage. And Carthage is where you read about Hannibal Barca and you read about the Battle of Canaan, 216 BC. And you read about the Carthaginians, who are descendants of the Phoenicians, descendants of the Garamantes. And you read about the Carthaginian wars with Rome. Okay, so just so we understand this, historically, Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio, and he had a brother named Lucius, and Lucius conquers part of Asia, and he takes the surname Asiaticus, and nobody says that Asia is named after a European, you know. So we just have to understand this historically. Okay, brother, thanks for calling in. Okay.
No, thank you for the information too.
Okay, no problem. Keep listening.
The dictionary. Thanks for the
information. Okay, keep listening. Peace. All right. All right, let's go to the 210 area code. And these are some of the things. These are some of the things we deal with in the online course. Some people, I think, some people watching us on Facebook have taken it. We deal with this, and we deal with the origins. We deal with the etymology of words. We deal with thousands of years of history. We deal with the origins of the words America, which goes back to the Los Amarisques, the Ameri, who were a group of Black African people in Nicaragua who lived near a mountain called Sierra Amérique, and Amerigo Vespucci, because Amerigo Vespucci's real name was not Amerigo, it was Aberigo, Aberigo. Just like Christopher Columbus's real name was Cristobal Colon, and Christopher Columbus is his name in English. It was Cristobal Colon, and you also see Cristoforo Colon. I think it was Cristoforo Colon or Cristoforo Colon. Aberigo Vespucci comes in contact with this group of Black African people, and he changes his name from Aberigo to Amerigo. And America is a Latin suffix denoting land. So America actually means land of the Ameri, which refers to a Black African people in Nicaragua. And then you deal with the fact that African people were here before Native Americans came into existence. We've been here at least 51,700 years in the land we call the United States of America. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade happens, but you have to understand the chronology of history. And we're making voyages from here back and forth to Africa as well, because we had already mastered sailing and nautical instruments and, you know, astronomy, things like this, right? So you have to understand the chronology of history. Okay. All right. So let's go to the 210 area code. Calling the 210 area code. Welcome to the African History Network show. Did you have a question or comment, or just listening to the show?
Hi, I've been listening to the show and really appreciating it. I really appreciate your scholarship.
Thank you,
I have
brother.
A question and a comment.
Go ahead. Oh, tell us your name. Tell us your first name and where you're calling from. Tell us your first name, where you're calling from.
Sorry. My name is Kemet. That's my chosen name. It's not my government name.
Kemet?
I'm calling from outside of Fresno, California.
Outside of Fresno?
Yeah,
okay, go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So, my question is, well, actually, let me get my comment first, because
go ahead.
I registered for your course.
Oh yeah. I saw it. Okay, cool. And as soon as you get off the phone, you can start watching. Just so you know, man. As soon as you get off the phone, you can start watching session 1 and session 2.
You're right. I've already watched session 1 and session 2.
Oh, okay.
But I appreciate it. But I was going to say, in session 1, you referred to the Arabs calling Egypt, Egypt, and I was going to offer a correction. I actually studied at UT. I know Dr. Berry. But in Arabic, they've always referred to Egypt as Misr, and it's actually referred to in the Bible as Mizraim.
Mizraim, which is Hebrew.
The English equivalent of Masrain in Arabic, which means the two lands. Being that the Arabs, they got their title for ancient Kemet from like the Amharics and the ancient Jews. So like it would be a Semitic word. It wouldn't be an English word, or one that's derived from Greek, which is where Egypt comes from. So yeah. Masr, that's my comment.
What they call it? Well, hold on just a second before you go to your question. They call it, the Arabs are in control of Egypt now. So they call it
right. They don't call it Egypt, except unless in English. In Arabic, they call it Masr.
Misr, okay, Misr, okay. Now, but Egypt,
they still call it Masr. Yeah,
but Egypt is going to be derived from Egyptos and Egyptus, which comes from Hekupata.
Right, that's Greek.
Well, Egyptos is Greek. Hekupata is not. That's Metal Netter. Right. Hekupata is Metal Netter. The Greeks call it Egyptos, and the Romans and Latin called it Egyptus.
Greeks got it from. I don't know if the Greeks maybe got it from the Copts, like the ancient Copts.
Well, no,
because I believe the Copts were the ones, the society that followed followed ancient Kemet.
Well,
maybe that's where they got it from.
Well, the Greeks got it from the Greeks got it from the Metal. The Greeks got it from the ancient Kemites, because it's Metal. Hekupata is Metal Netter. That means land of the temple of Ta. That's Metal Netter. Okay, the Greeks got it from them, and they call it Egyptos, Aegyptos. The Romans.
Okay, I'm not disputing whether Egypt was called Hekupata.
No. I'm just explaining.
I'm just saying the Arabs didn't call it.
Now I'm just explaining it because people are listening around the country, so they understand what we're talking about. And the Romans in Latin are going to call it Aegyptus, Aegyptus, and then at some point, Arabs are going to call it Egypt. At some point, now if you read, have you read Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder?
Not yet, but I ordered it.
Okay.
I ordered that and the Dr. Imhotep's book.
Dr. David Imhotep.
Okay.
Now, if you read Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization by Tony Browder, in the back of the book, in the glossary, I think it's page 268, that starts the glossary, and he gives you the definition of Aegyptos, and he gives you the etymological derivation of it, which goes back to Hekupata. So he breaks that down there in the glossary. Okay, go ahead to your comment.
That was my comment. So my question is...
Oh, your question. I'm sorry. Go ahead to your question. Recognizing
Dr. Imhotep's point about the first people to the Americas being of African origin. With Pan-Africanism and in light of the Atlantic slave trade, we see, this heavy orientation for people of the African diaspora to orient themselves towards Africa as if it's the motherland, without really knowing if their heritage is in fact predominantly Native American, meaning Black Indian, or however you want to term it, people that were here prior to Europeans and to the Asians that came over the Bering Strait.
Right.
So my question is, when you see traditional dances done by Native Americans, like the feathers and the stomping, it looks really similar to what you see in Zulu culture.
Yes.
And Xhosa culture.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering this big deal is made about Colin Kaepernick going back to Ghana. Is does he really even know that he has heritage from Ghana? And
he did a DNA test.
Just so heritage.
Just so you know, he did a DNA test. So when you do the DNA test, it will in some of them it'll tell you the region, so the Ghana. But the other thing is that it may not. But the other thing is that you're going to have
tell you where those people
and you're going to have Ghanaians.
It might tell you where they came from, but it doesn't tell you where they're at.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why he traces it,
or when they arrive.
Yeah, exactly. So he traces it back there, and it's good. It's good that he's reconnecting, to those African roots. But we have to understand the history prior to the transatlantic slave trade. Also, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and that's my question / concern. Is okay, my dad did a DNA test, and a lot of this DNA came from West Africa as well.
Right.
We haven't done one on my mom, but we also know that she has a lot of Native American heritage. But as at first glance, all of my relatives on both sides of my family look Black, even the ones that are Native American.
Right.
And so
there's a good reason why.
Is it? Yeah, no, I'm completely on board with that reason.
Right.
It makes sense. But culturally, if Pan-Africanism is where we need to go in order to shore up the Black community and the Black diaspora, should we then not fully embrace and acknowledge the Native American cultural practices that are here, because they could be temporarily more relevant than what happens in between Africans leaving continental Africa coming up through America.
Right.
Because, even in Hidden Colors, they mentioned this. All throughout the Caribbean and Polynesia, they recognized that they had cultural orientation, or rather that they're culturally oriented towards Africa. They may have come from there previously, but they were here.
Right.
The same thing with Puerto Rico with the Tainos.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, let me explain. Let me answer your question. No, I got it. So what happens is this is why I have a problem with the slave themed movies, and I talk about this in my radio shows. I talk about this in my presentations. This is why I have a problem, even though the transatlantic slave trade is part of our history. Totally understand that. But when you have, and I did a video about the TV show Underground. And I have a problem with the slave TV shows also. Because what they do is,
I saw it, and I agree with you.
Yeah, they perpetuate.
It's psychological warfare.
Well, that
psychological warfare.
That, but also they perpetuate the 1619 myth, the myth that our history started in this country August 20th, 1619, and that's not true. We've been here for tens of thousands of years. This is our land taken away from us, and we have to understand the chronology of history. The transatlantic slave trade happens. You're going to have over 100 different ethnic groups of African people who were here, brought here, things like this. But there are tens of thousands of years of African history right here in this country that most of our people know nothing about, and we were here before Native Americans came into existence. So Professor Kapernick, one of my teachers, you may have heard me interview him before. He's in the Hidden Colors documentaries, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman. He says to understand the existence of something, you first have to understand the pre-existence of existence. To understand the existence of something, you first have to understand the pre-existence of existence.
Otherwise.
Yeah. So it's all right to trace ancestry back to Ghana and embrace Ghana. Now you're going to have some Africans who are going to have ancestry here prior to the transatlantic slave trade, and we know that there are going to be groups of Africans brought here also during the transatlantic slave trade. So some of us are going to have ancestry that we may be able to trace here prior to the transatlantic slave trade, and others are going to be direct descendants of those brought here during the transatlantic slave trade. And you're going to have an intermixing as well. When you look at the people who we call the Native Americans, once again, you're going to have two main groups. Number one, you're going to have the groups that are the offspring of the intermixing of Africans who are already here and Asians who come here around 3000 BC, cross the Bering Strait, that land bridge between Alaska and Siberia. They're going to intermix their offspring or who we call Native Americans. But then also you're going to have indigenous groups of African people who were already here. And when Europeans come here, a lot of those groups are going to be reclassified as Native Americans also. And this is why if you don't know what you're looking for, you won't be able to find them, like the Algonquin. When you read Dr. David Imhotep's book,
being classified as a Native American, the thing with being classified as a Native American is that it isn't a racial category. And so when you start looking at census data, they can classify you as racially something else, ethnically something else. You know, like you can be white Hispanic or you can be black Hispanic.
Right. Well,
and racial identity is the thing that becomes a consequence. And so with African American populations that are of Native American origin,
right,
if they're classified as black, despite their ethnically being Native American rather than ethnically being West African, then this begins to obscure that history. Well, not just begins to, it does it very effectively.
Well,
okay, go ahead. My thing is like, we know that the Atlantic slave trade happened. We know that people got brought over here and brought over to the Caribbean and to South America. But were there also African Americans here, or Africans, indigenous African, Indian, black people, Indian, whatever you want to call them, that were caught into the slave trade with those who were brought over from West Africa?
I think you're going to find that as well. You're going to have some of them who are going to be enslaved as well, because we know there are at least 371 peace treaties that Europeans broke with Native Americans. We know there are at least 371 peace treaties. Okay. Number one. Number two, you're going to, this is why it's so important really to understand that chronology of history prior to 1619. Understand what took place before then. And also the other thing that's important to understand about Native Americans, number one, you talked about it's not a racial category. Now, if you look at the U.S. Constitution signed September 17, 1787, if you look, for instance, at the 3/5 Compromise, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, it refers to Indians. It referred to the Native Americans as Indians in that U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, commonly known as the 3/5 Compromise. And people can read it. You can go to loc.gov, which is the Library of Congress's website, loc.gov. You can read it there. So in the Constitution, they refer to who we call Native Americans. They refer to them as Indians, number one. Number two, you also have to understand the history because of the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. Okay, the Dawes Rolls, the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, and how a lot of these Native Americans became white. And this was introduced by Senator Henry L. Dawes in 1887. And this was a reallocation of 138 million acres of land. And this is where you get the $5 Indians from. So they were reallocating land to Native Americans and African people, things like this. And Europeans got 2/3 of this land because when they found out about the benefits that these Native Americans were getting, et cetera, they had their names added to the Dawes Rolls. They paid $5 to have their names added to the Dawes Rolls because one of the stipulations was to get the land, you had to anglicize your name. You had to anglicize your name. So a white man named John Smith, okay, already has an anglicized name. So they paid $5 to have their names added to the Dawes Rolls to get this land. So Dr. Claude Anderson, who's another one of my teachers, and I've interviewed him a number of times. People can listen to the podcast or the shows I've done with them. Dr. Claude Anderson talks about how
he talks about enforcing the Indian treaties.
Yeah, but he talks about how about 90% of the people today in the U.S. who call themselves Native Americans are descendants of these white people who have their names added to the Dawes Rolls, D-A-W-E-S. People look this up, Dawes Rolls, D-A-W-E-S. You can go to Britannica.com and search for the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, and you can read about it, okay? So that's the other thing. How did the Native Americans become white? Or almost white. I've seen Native Americans, man, with blonde hair, naturally blonde hair, look white. I have one. I did it. Let me tell you.
Oh yeah. I'm familiar with him. I met some myself. It's like all Native American, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you this, and I'll let you go because I got to get to this other subject. I spoke back in 2011, 2012. I spoke at an Indigenous Peoples Day ceremony. So instead of Columbus Day, October 12th, a lot of cities and a lot of people celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day because they realized that the story about Columbus is not accurate. And he never even came to this land that we call the United States of America. The closest he came here was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. Okay, number one. So I'm doing my presentation, and my presentation is about the first Americans were Africans. This is the information I'm dealing with, and I'm showing where Columbus went on his 4 voyages. And I'm a little nervous. I'm usually not nervous when I do my presentation. I'm a little nervous because a lot of people I'm speaking to are Native Americans. So I dropped my information on them, and I had Native Americans who came up to me afterwards and said, you know, they liked my presentation. They never knew this information because I'm dealing with the African presence in this country going back 51,000 years. But I had this one white Native American who came up to me. He had a Native American name. He had white skin, blue eyes, blonde hair. His hair is in 2 ponytails. And he said that this land used to be called Turtle Island. I'm like, how the hell did you know that? He said this, which is true because Dr. David Imhotep deals with this in his book. But I've heard other Native Americans talk about this. One of the names of this land was Turtle Island. So we have to also look at how did the Native Americans become white? That's the other thing we have to look at. Okay, man. All right, Kemet, thanks for calling in. Okay, brother. Keep listening, man. Okay, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. All right. And I saw Yolanda's comment on Facebook. No, Yolanda, he was not getting, whether Yolanda say he was getting rude with me. He was not getting rude with me, okay? He was asking questions. He's cool. All right. Why is the caller being rude? No, he wasn't being rude. Okay, Yolanda. Yolanda's trying to look out for me. Okay. All right. So it's still okay. So if you have comments, post them on Facebook because we can't call in on Blog Talk anymore. We passed our allotment here, and we'll be here for a few more minutes. Hey, if you like this information, how's everybody doing on Facebook? How you like this information? How's everybody doing on Facebook? We got Stephanie, Brother Kabaka in Detroit, Hotep, Brother Kabaka. I got CL Tisdale. CL Tisdale talking about Runoko Rashidi. Yeah, Runoko's good. He has some good information. I know Runoko. I've interviewed him. Melvin, how you doing, Melvin? Without the Dawes roll, they wouldn't have claim to native benefits. Thus the term $5 Indian. Yeah. Now, here's one of the books that you may want to get. And we use this book in our online course. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. This is the second edition. Came out in 2012. Now, this book is $8. It's from the Nation of Islam Research Group. Powerful, powerful book, because they deal with all the laws and everything that maldistributed wealth into the hands of Europeans. Okay, all the laws, the Dawes Allotment Act, all that stuff they deal with in here. They talk about the origins of the labor unions, everything. It's like Black Labor White Wealth by Dr. Claude Anderson, except it's much more concentrated. Okay, this is a powerful book right here. How white folk, any white supremacists, you can debate them with this book and shut them down, because they don't know this history. Most white supremacists, all this stuff, you can study this, you can shut them down. Okay. So this is a very powerful book. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. Just Google that, go to NOI.org. Now, also at finalcall.com, official website of the Final Call newspaper, they did a 4-part series back in 2011 based upon this book called Hard Work or Hardly Working, How White Folks Got So Rich. Hard Work or Hardly Working, How White Folks Got So Rich. Go to finalcall.com, search for that, Google that. Hard Work or Hardly Working, How White Folks Got So Rich. Okay. And it's 4 articles, and they outline this book and all the laws, things like this, the Dawes Allotment Act. They deal with the origin of the origins of the drug laws going back to 1875 in California against the Chinese. Deal with the origins of the labor unions, things like this. Labor unions pop up right after slavery. A lot of your national labor unions, like the National Labor Union founded in 1866, they pop up right after slavery ends. Okay, why? Because there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. Okay, and they were able to exploit our labor. But once slavery ends and we're able to compete for wages, now they create these labor unions to lock African Americans out of these jobs we have been doing practically for free, basically for free, for 246 years. This is where your labor unions come from. AF, the American Federation of Labor, National Labor Union, all these things. And they had contracts with white industries and companies that you could only hire white men that belong to these unions. And then from 1866 to 1880, you're going to have about 12 million European immigrants that come to this country. And a lot of the jobs they got should have gone to us because we were here first and we had the skills and we were already doing the jobs. Okay. So you have to understand this history, understand this chronology of history. Okay. Also, if you like this type of information, if you want to register for the online course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is some of the type of information we deal with in the online course, and we go deep into it. It's a 12-hour, 6-week online course. It normally meets on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It meets live. But we record all the sessions. You can go back and watch them over and over again. If you miss anything, go back and watch it. Not a problem. As soon as you register, you can watch session 1, session 2. We have a lot of bonus content also you can watch. 4 courses, only $40. So for the price of 8 cups of Starbucks coffee, you can go through this online course and the information is going to blow you away. We provide you with the articles, the websites, the video clips, the evidence to document what I'm talking about also. Okay. All right, I want to get to this last topic here. And I may have to start doing, I started out doing the African History Network show on Blog Talk Radio on Thursdays, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We did that for a few years. And I'm on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation Thursday mornings on the morning show, Wake Up with Steve Hood, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can listen to me there. And then I do my show on Sunday nights on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. So we'll be on this Sunday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll broadcast on Facebook Live. And you can go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have how to listen on your smartphone and everything, because I do regular radio, 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. But it looks like there's a demand for me to start doing the African History Network show on Blog Talk Radio every Thursday, again, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I have to consider that and see if I could do that. I have a 4-month-old daughter now, so my life has changed. So I have to see if I can start doing that again on Thursday nights. Okay. I want to get to this last topic. The East St. Louis race riot of 1917. It started July 2nd, 1917, East St. Louis Race Riot. Okay. And you're going to have a lot of race riots in the history of this country. We know 1919 was known as the Red Summer. You're going to have over 25 major race riots that break out in this country. This was the year after World War I ends, and you have a lot of white men when they left to go to World War I. They had jobs. It's going to create a labor vacuum. That labor vacuum is going to be filled by African Americans as well as immigrants coming to this country. When these white men came back from World War I, they didn't have jobs, but what they did have was skills on how to fight and how to kill, and they brought back weaponry with them. And they're going to use these skills in the Red Summer. It was called the Red Summer because it was said the blood, the streets of America were flowing with red blood. They're going to use it there. They're going to use it in 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Tulsa Massacre, Tulsa Race Riot in the Greenwood District, Black Wall Street was. But 1917, this is during World War I. So 1914 and 1918, you have World War I, right? This is 2 years after the Birth of a Nation debuts. Birth of a Nation debuts February 8th, 1915. Okay, it's going to cause race riots in the street also. This is during World War I. This was at the time the longest movie in history, 3 hours. Most expensive movie in history, $100,000. The movie The Birth of a Nation was based upon a novel called The Klansman by a man named Thomas Dixon. The Klansman is going to be turned into a play in 1906. In Philadelphia in 1906, you're going to have about 3,000 African Americans who are going to protest this play because we knew it was detrimental to our existence because it dehumanized African Americans. We totally understood this. And when the movie debuts, you're going to see African Americans protesting against this. The NAACP is going to lead protests against the movie. When it goes to Boston, you see William Monroe Trotter, who's going to lead protests against it also. Okay. So we understood how this was detrimental to our existence, the movie, The Birth of a Nation. And it takes place in slavery. It takes place during Reconstruction. It takes place during slavery, the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877. And the movie, it shows a group of Union Negro soldiers who go into a southern town, I think it was in Virginia, after the Civil War ends during Reconstruction, and they take over, push around Europeans, subjugate them, right? They're going to make fun of African-American congressmen and senators because you're going to have about 20 some odd African-American congressmen and senators during Reconstruction. There are going to be significant gains that we make during Reconstruction. A lot of this is going to be reversed when Reconstruction ends because of the Compromise of 1877. Rutherford B. Hayes becomes president, Republican becomes president, and the Union troops are removed from the South that were, to a certain extent, enforcing the law and protecting the rights of African Americans, former slaves. So the movie The Birth of a Nation is also going to rejuvenate the Ku Klux Klan that had practically died out by 1915. So the Ku Klux Klan, founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee, right? It's founded by members of the Democratic Party, all right? The Democratic Party did not found the Ku Klux Klan. They were members of the Democratic Party who founded the Ku Klux Klan. These were former Confederate soldiers, most of them. And the Democratic Party was the party of the plantation owner, the aristocracy, heavy in the South, the Democrats, right? We know the Republican Party was founded in 1854 by groups of abolitionists as a direct response to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 that left up the practice of slavery in Western states because of Western expansion. They left this up to the sovereignty of the citizens living in those Western states, right? So this is going to cause slavery to expand in these Western territories, some of these Western territories also, okay? So the Republican Party was founded by groups of abolitionists in 1854 as a direct response to the Kansas-Nebraska Act to be the counter to the Democratic Party, okay? So it's important to understand like this chronology of history, right? And 1854 was 2 years after Frederick Douglass gave his speech, July 5th, 1852, what to the slave is the 4th of July, right? Today, Republicans are doing everything they can to put African Americans back in slavery with rampant voter suppression, things like this. Is important. It's very important for people to understand, because of President Lyndon Johnson, who was a Southern Democrat, who was a Southern segregationist, and openly used the N-word, right? Because of him signing the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, Executive Order 11246 in September of 1965, that's commonly called affirmative action, the Fair Housing Act of 68, creating Medicaid and Medicare also. But because of these civil rights, the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act especially, these Southern segregationists, these obstructionists that Malcolm X talks about in the Battle of the Bullet, April 3rd, 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio. He talks about it in June 28th, 1964, when he gives a speech announcing the organization of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU, June 28th, 1964. This is about a week before the Civil Rights Act is signed, July 2nd, 1964, by President Johnson, right? Because of these Civil Rights Acts and Voting Rights Acts signed, these Southern segregationists, these obstructionists who are Democrats, like Strom Thurmond, they're going to leave the Democratic Party, and where do they go? They go to the Republican Party. And this is where they are today. This is why when you look at the draconian legislation that's damaging African Americans, 99% of that is coming from Republicans, because they left the Democratic Party and they went to the Republican Party. And African Americans are going to switch over largely from being Republicans to Democrats, because a lot of that starts in 1960 because of the presidential race in 1960, President Kennedy and Richard Nixon, and because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in a lunch counter sit-in, and he's put in jail. John F. Kennedy, who's not president at the time, John F. Kennedy calls Coretta Scott King and says, "I'm sorry to hear about Dr. King being arrested. Is there anything that I can do?" He makes a call and gets Dr. King sprung from jail. So the African American vote put Kennedy over and got him elected as president in 1960, largely because of him getting Dr. King sprung from jail. Okay. And then we know July 11th, 1963, Kennedy gives a very powerful televised civil rights speech. This is 4 hours before Medgar Evers is assassinated. June 12th, 1963, he's assassinated 12:30 a.m. Jackson, Mississippi, 1963, Medgar Evers, civil rights activist. Okay. So we have to understand this chronology of history. Okay, so when we deal with the East St. Louis race riot of 1917, and this was during the Great Migration, over 1 million Africans in the 1910s moved from the South up north, looking for a better way of life, better jobs, equal protection under the law, want to own homes. They're trying to escape white supremacy and racism in the South, but they find it in the North also, just in a different form. Many of them find a better way of life, but they still find white supremacy and racism just in a different form. So when we look at so I just want to lay out that history, because I know people are coming from different levels of understanding, right? So when we look at the city of East St. Louis in Illinois, this was the scene of one of the bloodiest race riots in the 20th century. You're going to have racial tensions began to increase in February 1917, when 470 African-American workers were hired to replace white workers who had gone on strike against the aluminum ore company. Okay. So you have African-American migration putting a strain on racial tensions in East St. Louis. Here's a little background history on East St. Louis. Now, East St. Louis at one point was briefly called Illinois Town, and their incorporation date was 1859. East St. Louis was the home to only 5,600 people in 1870. 5,600 people in 1870. And then you're going to have the National Stockyard in 1873, and the Eads Bridge, EADS, which came 1 year later, 1874. And the city became, you're going to have railroads running through the city, railroad tracks running through the city. You're going to have 22 railroads connecting St. Louis to northeast and south, okay? 22 railroad tracks. Now, by 1910, which is 7 years before the East St. Louis race riot, by 1910, there are going to be 58,000 residents in East St. Louis. Okay, so you go from 5,600 residents in 1870. 40 years later, 58,000 residents, 10 times more. Okay. In 1910, right at the beginning of the Great Migration. Okay. So East St. Louis by 1910 is going to be home to many industries. And these industries are going to burn mountains of city coal, sooty coal from nearby Illinois coal mines. Okay. Now, the big employers at this time in East St. Louis are the Aluminum Ore Company, and this is where you're going to have white men going on strike. The Aluminum Ore Company. You have the American Steel Foundry. You have Republic Iron and Steel. Okay, you have that company. You have Aubert, Nestor Glass, and Elliott Frog and Switch. Okay, which was a frog was part of a railroad switch. Okay, Aubert, Nestor Glass, and you have the Elliott Frog and Switch Company. Okay, so many of the factories were built just beyond the city limit to avoid municipal taxes, which helped keep city services shoddy and corrupt. Okay, so they're just outside the city limits. They're not paying city taxes to East St. Louis. So this helps keep city services corrupt and in poor conditions. All right. So when you look, so what's going to happen is World War I is going to take place, right? 1914, 1918 or so, World War I. And World War I created a bonanza for the draft animal trade. Okay. It made American industry hum. You're going to have to build military equipment, things like this, right? And it aggravated social conflict that exploded in violence in summer of 1917. You're going to have thousands of African Americans who come from the South. They're going to move north and work in factories. In East St. Louis, the African American population in 1910 was 6,000. And by 1917, it nearly doubled. 1910, the African American population was 6,000 in East St. Louis, and it nearly doubled by 1917. Okay. So that spring of 1917, you're going to have white men at the Aluminum Ore Company, okay, at 32nd and Missouri Avenues. They're going to go on strike. And management at the Aluminum Ore Company, they're going to hire strike breakers, both white and African American, okay, who are going to cross the picket lines and go to work. So you're going to have embittered white union leaders who remembered these African American faces, and they demanded that City Hall, quote unquote, get rid of the newcomers, because you have African Americans migrating, and this already puts pressure. You have this growing African American population, and they're seen as a threat labor wise. And when you study the history of race riots in this country, they're either tied to usually one of four things: labor shortages or jobs, labor. They're tied to politics, afraid that African Americans are going to gain political control, or they gain some type of political control. So it's around politics, voting. It's going to be around allegations of an African American man raping a white woman, looking at a white woman, smiling at a white woman, dreaming about a white woman, something like that. Okay. Usually those things, the economic reasons, it could be economic reasons, jealousy of prosperity. It could be they looked at as a threat, taking jobs away from white men. It could be political reasons or over a white woman. Okay. Usually those are four main reasons that you see the race riots as well as the lynchings, okay, take place in this country. Okay. So you're going to have tension that was already raw when white men in a Ford motor car, probably a Model T, in a Ford automobile, they're going to shoot into African American homes on the night of July 1st, 1917. All right, and African American men who were armed, because we weren't stupid. No, in African American, we had guns and we knew how to use them, because you had a lot of retired World War I veterans who were African Americans who come back also. And they come back and they know how to fight and kill and shoot. Okay. So you had African American men who were armed, And they're going to gather at Bond Avenue and 10th Street in East St. Louis. And they fired onto an oncoming Ford automobile, and they killed the two people inside, who turned out to be police officers who were coming to the scene to investigate the shooting, the original shooting, the shooting into the homes of African Americans. So these African American men didn't know these were police officers, so they shot and killed them. Okay, they thought these were some more white people coming to terrorize them. So the next morning, July 2nd, 1917, you're gonna have African American, you're gonna have white people who were they had a tense meeting at the Labor Temple in downtown East St. Louis. And they after this meeting, they're going to go out and start beating up and killing African Americans. This is July 2nd, 1917. This is when this race riot breaks out. Okay. Prior to this, May 28th, 1917, very important date, May 28th, 1917. The violence is going to start May 28th, 1917, shortly after a city council meeting was called. Angry white workers lodged formal complaints against African-American migrants coming to East St. Louis from the South. They leveled these complaints with the mayor of East St. Louis. And after the meeting ended, news of an attempted robbery of a white man by a armed African-American man began to circulate through the city of East St. Louis. So as a result of this news, white mobs of white men start to form, and they rampage through downtown East St. Louis, beating all African-Americans that they found. The mobs also stopped trolley cars and street cars, pulling African-American passengers out and beating them on the streets and the sidewalks. Now, the governor of the state of Illinois at this time, his name was Frank O. Lowden, 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 Frank O. Lowden. So Governor Lowden eventually called in the National Guard to put down the violence and put down the mobs. So when the National Guard comes in, the mobs are going to slowly disperse. So the May 28th disturbance, 1917 in East St. Louis, was a prelude to the violence, the rampant violence that was going to explode July 2nd, 1917. Okay. So after the May 28th riot, very little was done to prevent further riots from taking place. And no precautions were taken to ensure white job security or to grant union recognition, anything like this. So this further increased the already high level of hostilities towards African Americans, because they're seen as a threat of taking these white men's jobs. No reforms were made in the police force, which did little to quell the violence in May of 2017. Governor Frank Lowden ordered the National Guard out of the city of East St. Louis on June 10th. Okay, so they're going to come in and put down the violence. He orders them out of the city June 10th, right? And this left the residents of East St. Louis in an uneasy state of high racial tension. So this is going to explode July 2nd, 1917. Okay. So what's going to happen is you have these men rampaging after this meeting, okay, at the Labor Temple, downtown East St. Louis, and they go out beginning beating and killing African Americans. Rampaging white men, they're going to use guns, rocks, pipes, and nooses. White women are going to egg them on, as usual, sometimes taking part in this, sometimes taking part in the killing, sometimes taking part in the beating. Now, rioters are going to set fires to African American neighborhoods and torch the Broadway Opera House on the false tale that African Americans were hiding there. They're going to torch the Broadway Opera House. Now, many African Americans are going to flee to St. Louis, the city of St. Louis, across the Eads and Municipal Bridges, MacArthur Bridge. East St. Louis police are going to stand by and do not a damn thing, or they're going to join into the carnage, because these are basically all white men. Okay. Now, the Illinois National Guard soldiers who were hustled to town did little to protect people until late in the day. So this is July 2nd, 1917. They're going to do little to protect African Americans until late in the day. Now, on July 3rd, 1917, July 3rd, 1917, the Post-Dispatch, which was the newspaper at the time, okay? I'm not sure if it's the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, because there was a St. Louis Post-Dispatch, or if it's just a Post-Dispatch, but there's a newspaper there in the area. They ran a story about an account by Carlos F. Hurd. Carlos F. Hurd, okay? And he was a reporter, all right? And the reporter scooped the world with interviews of Carlos F. Hurd. He did interviews of the survivors of the Titanic.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio.
Of Titanic survivors for 5 years prior to this, right? Now, Carlos F. Hurd wrote that he witnessed the massacre of helpless Negroes in streets where a black skin was a death warrant. Okay. Okay. Let me continue here. Okay. So Carlos F. Hurd said he wrote that he witnessed the quote massacre of helpless Negroes, end quote, on streets where a black skin, quote, a black skin was a death warrant. A black skin was a death warrant. So you're going to have more than 300 homes and businesses that are going to be burned down. And the local investigation was poor. It was inept. Okay. So it's hard to know the full scope of the carnage. Same thing with Tulsa, Oklahoma. All right. The official death count was 39 African Americans and 9 whites, but the total was probably closer to 100. Okay. Total probably closer to 100. So you're going to have factories, because you have these factories there, right? As I talked about, aluminum ore company, you're going to have the railroads, things like this. American Steel Foundry, Republican Iron Steel. So the factories are going to beg the African American workers to return to work, but many of them didn't. I can understand why. When the schools reopened, African American enrollment in these schools was down more than half, more than 50%. A lengthy congressional investigation reporting 1 year later described the riot as savagery. Now, Lena Cook was an eyewitness to the carnage. Lena Cook and her family were taking a streetcar home to St. Louis from a fishing outing in Illinois. Okay. And the streetcar reached downtown East St. Louis as angry whites were on the rampage. Her husband's name was Edward. Okay. Edward Cook. And her son was Lariza Beard, Lurizza, Lariza Beard. He was 14 years old. Okay. And they were pulled from the streetcar by this angry mob of white people and shot to death. Her husband and her 14-year-old son were pulled from the streetcar and shot to death. A white bystander who was a hardware merchant named William Kaiser, Keyser, William Kaiser, was also killed, and it's believed that he was killed by the same shot that passed through Lena Cook's son, Lariza Beard. Okay. St. Louis County authorities eventually charged more than 140 people, most of them white, and including police officers and East St. Louis Mayor Fred Mahlman, Mollman, Mahlman. So they're going to charge them. Indictments against the officers were quote unquote lost, and the charge against the mayor was dropped. You're going to have 21 people who were convicted of serious crimes, including 2 white men in the murder of William Kaiser, the store merchant. Those verdicts came after the brave testimony of Lena Cook, okay, the woman who lost her husband and her son. And Lena Cook never wavered against racist cross-examination either during the trial. Newspaper files have no mention of the verdicts in the murders of Lena Cook's husband and son. Okay. So there was also a hero named Louis P. Allo, A-L-O-E, Louis P. Allo. I think he was a white male. He's president of the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. And he was one man who tried to help the African Americans in this case here. So you can read more about this, the East St. Louis Race Riot, at blackpast.org, blackpast.org, and also STL Today. STL Today has a good article. Look back 250, race hatred, workforce tensions explode in East St. Louis in 1917. Race hatred, workforce tensions explode in East St. Louis in 1917. You can Google East St. Louis Race Riot of 1917. There are very little pictures or footage of this riot, of this massacre, because the mobs of white people attacked the photographers and the newspaper people and smashed their cameras. So there's very little footage or pictures of it. Okay, but they have a picture of they have a few pictures of the carnage here also in the article from STL Today, St. Louis Today, STL Today. Okay, let's see here. All right, so this date in African American history, you could post your comments here. But that the East St. Louis Race Riot in 1917, that is before the Red Summer of 1919. We had over 25 major race riots across this country. All right. Okay, this date in African American history. So once again, how's everybody doing tonight? Hey, if you're just tuning in, number one, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. You're listening to the African History Network show. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. I've been studying history for 25 years. African history, African American history, entrepreneurship, economic empowerment, things like this, right? I'm in a number of documentaries. Elementary Genocide Part 3 comes out August 22nd. I'm in that documentary from director Raheem Shabazz. I'm in the Black Friday documentaries from director Rick Mathis, and we'll be doing a screening of Black Friday at the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo in Atlanta. So I'll be in Atlanta. I'll get there on Saturday the 15th. So I'll be the 15th and the 16th. The Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo. So those in the Atlanta area, or if you want to travel, go to liberatedmindsexpo.com. liberatedmindsexpo.com. We'll post a link again. liberatedmindsexpo.com. And that's the Black Homeschooling Conference. I'm there each year, third weekend in July, and I'm one of the vendors, and I'm one of the presenters also. So I'll be presenting on Sunday at the conference. Okay. So this is the African History Network show. We started out talking tonight about Colin Kaepernick, his travel to Ghana, and his statement to African Americans: how can you celebrate Independence Day when when our ancestors were robbed of their independence because of slavery here in the U.S. In 1776, right? Then we talked about 5 myths about slavery. Okay, broke that down, and then we dealt with the East St. Louis Race Riot, which the anniversary of 1917 anniversary was July 2nd. Okay. If you like this type of information, hey, you may want to register for our online course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of African history and African American history. And it's an online course that I teach. All the sessions are, we do the sessions live on Fridays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All the sessions are recorded. You can watch it over and over again. Okay. As soon as you register, it's only $40 for the course. As soon as you register, you can watch session 1 and session 2. You'll be ready for class on Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the information will blow your way. Okay. When we come back, we'll wrap up with this date in African American history. Okay.
Tonight, Front Page Challenge welcomes the outspoken Negro leader, Malcolm X.
Sir, what's the real reason why you two men split? Is it merely ideological, or is it personality? What else?
Probably personality. It was not the statement that originally was given by the movement when we split. It's more personality than anything else.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Toms. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
Black Muslims have sometimes, whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
Well, that's something of an argument, but I've heard speeches made by some of the people of your group. I think I've heard you make speeches. It seemed to me that you were advocating what I would have to describe, I think, as violence to meet the serious injuries that have been done your people, with which I totally agree.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
Just before Pierre takes it, you've got a pretty good fighter and the world's heavyweight champion lined up with you to help out. Yes, Pierre.
Well, Mr. X, I guess I call you that. Is that the proper appellation,
Yes.
Mr. X? I'm wondering if you still believe, as I think you certainly did at the time you were allied to the Black Muslim movement, in a segregated black nation in North America.
I don't believe in any form of segregation or any form of racism. I'm against any form of segregation and against racism.
Am I right in saying that the Black Muslim movement, which you have left, did believe in that?
Well, Elijah Muhammad taught his followers that the only solution was a separate state for black people. And as long as I thought he genuinely believed that himself, I believed in him and believed in his solution. But when I began to doubt that he himself believed that that was feasible, and I saw no kind of action designed to bring it into existence or bring it about, then I turned in a different direction.
Are you still a Muslim yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam, which believes in brotherhood, complete brotherhood of all people. But at the same time that I believe in this brotherhood, I don't believe in forcing my desire for brotherhood upon those who aren't willing to accept it.
Of course, I think the Christians would say that they also believed in brotherhood. What did you say to that?
I'd say they believe in it, but don't practice it.
That'd be a pretty good answer.
Sir, when the muezzin goes up in the minaret twice a day, he cries to the world, there is but one God, and he is Allah. Do you deny that there is a Christian God?
The muezzin does this 5 times a day.
5 times, and I only heard him twice.
Well, you were fortunate to hear him twice. But he does this 5 times a day, and the same God that he says that he expresses the existence of is the God that the Christians profess to believe in themselves, and the God that the Jews believe in. One God, the creator of the universe. The Muslims believe in the God that created the universe, and I think the Christians do, and the Jews do. Now, as long as all of them are talking about the creator, the Jews may call him Jehovah, and Christians may have another name for him. Those who are Arabic speaking refer to him as Allah. Well, we believe in the same God.
Now, as the Muslim religion advances in the United States, are you modernizing it or sticking with the old faiths? For example, the complete segregation of the sexes.
I think that everything today on this earth is being modernized. Religious principles and practices, as well as political and other things.
Now, when you went to Mecca, this is a very sacred and forbidden city. I tried to get to Mecca myself and certainly didn't make it, not being a Muslim. But how would they accept you as one? You're an American. There are few American Muslims.
This is true. And by being an American and not having not being able to speak the Arabic language, I did strike a snag, a very serious snag. But I was fortunate to have been pretty well known by the officials in Arabia, and they knew too that I had accepted Orthodox Islam. It had been highly publicized in the paper, and I became a guest of the state. I was a guest of Prince Faisal, the present King Faisal, and they made it possible for me to go before the committee, Hajj committee or Hajj court, who examines you and asks you questions about your belief, and if you pass it, then you are okay to go to Mecca. But it's
you would have to have a translator there.
I had one. Then realizing that our problem in America, that we are black Americans, and we have a problem that goes beyond religion, we formed a group known as the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And the objective of this organization, it's non-religious, number one. Any Negro can belong to it. And the objective of that organization is to bring about a condition that will guarantee respect and recognition of the 22 million black Americans as human beings. We feel that the problem, number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts and taken into the United Nations in the same manner that the problems of the black man in South Africa, Angola, and other parts of the world, and even the way they're trying to bring the problems of the Jews in Russia into the United Nations because of violation of human rights. We believe that our problem is one not a violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights. Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we're denied the right to be a human being.
Rex, may I thank you very much for coming on our program and perhaps clearing away some of the cobwebs of misconception that some of us might have had about your belief. And I think you're a very sincere man, and it takes a lot of courage to admit a former belief is wrong, and we congratulate you for that and the service you performed tonight in giving us your views. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was from 1965. That was in that's from the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company. It's either January or February 1965, because we know Brother Malcolm was assassinated February 21st, 1965 at the Audubon Ballroom, right? So it was either January, February 1965. Okay. All right. So shout out to everybody. How's everybody doing? Y'all hanging with me too. Damn, it's midnight. I didn't realize it's this late, man. But you know, I get caught up in history and I just go. I'm tired, but I get in when I start talking about history. You know, I just go. All right. So Melvin on Facebook said, my first time here, but not my last. I've learned something tonight, brother. I thank you for trying to enlighten our minds. Okay. So we got Stephanie, Josh. He said, I love Brother Malcolm. Shirley Carter in the house. Phyllis said, what's going on here? The African History Network shows a whole lot going on. 9:15 in LA, Wendell said, okay. That LA is 3 hours behind us. We're Eastern Standard Time here in Detroit. Okay. No, I'm not in California. No, you know, I've never been to California. Hey, now, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, email me, go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can contact me through the website, email me through the website. If you want to bring me in to do a presentation for your group or organization. I've never been to California. Okay. Been in Seattle, Washington. So you could bring me out to your, do a presentation for your group or organization. And also at our website, we have a recommended reading list of books, recommended reading list of 60 books. So people always ask, well, what books should I read? What books should I read? We have a recommended reading list there that you can start with to build your education center. Every African-American home should have an education center. We have entertainment centers. We have the flat screen TVs and the Wii's and the PlayStations and the Xboxes and Blu-ray DVD players. And, you know, we have all this type of stuff. The entertainment center, we have to have education centers. We come from a people who had libraries. Not only did we have libraries, but when the Moors go into Europe, they're going to build libraries there. And the first university in Europe was the University of Salamanca in Spain, 1285 AD approximately. This was built by the African Moors and Arabs. And we have libraries in, you know, Timbuktu and Janay and these West African West African cities, things like this. We have them in ancient Kemet. Libraries also. We need to have libraries in every African-American home. Not a library, but a library. And you have to have the African history books and the science books and the math books and the almanacs and the atlases and the thesaurus and the dictionaries and the globes and all this stuff there. And encyclopedias. You may have an online encyclopedia, DVD-ROM, or you may have a physical encyclopedia also. But we have to have education centers, okay, in every African-American home. All right. Okay, somebody asked, who was I? I'm Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network. I'm the creator, owner of the Facebook fan page we're broadcasting on, the African History Network. You have almost 1 million followers here. Share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll post a link again. All of my DVD lectures are there. Okay, so I have over 30 DVD lectures. We have bundle packs. We have the Reclaiming the African Mind bundle pack. It has my latest DVD lectures there right on the homepage. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have another bundle pack. You get 23 of my lectures for one low price also. It's right on the homepage also. And the website connects you to our YouTube channel where we have over 600 video clips. You can also listen to audio podcasts of our radio shows. Over 750 audio podcasts. And you can read my articles that I write also. So AfricanHistoryNetwork.com connects you to all of that. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay. All right. We'll get to this date in African American history in just a minute here. Let me get to some of your comments here. Alexa said, I agree 100%. Doris in New York, how you doing? If people did their research, there would be no time for BS or CL. I agree with that. All right. People did their research. There'd be no time for a bunch of nonsense. All right. Your thoughts create feelings. Your feelings create actions and behaviors. Your actions and behaviors create results. Your thoughts create feelings. Your feelings create actions and behaviors. Your actions and behaviors create results. Okay. This date in African American history, July 6th, the National Council of Colored People was formed on this date in 1853. The National Council of Colored People formed on this date in 1853. The group's purpose was to improve vocational training for African Americans. The group's purpose was to improve vocational training for African Americans. Ida B. Wells Barnett. Ida B. Wells. Now, this was one of the original ride or die chicks. Now, okay, I do 4 online courses. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach in school. That's the most popular course. I do Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. I also have a DVD lecture of that title also. I do How Richard Nixon's War on Drugs was a war on the African American community, and I have a DVD lecture on that as well. And Empire Strikes Black, the Propaganda of the Media. And some of these online courses develop out of lectures that I did, and I have just too much information to put into, a lecture. Okay. So we developed these in the online courses. But Ida Wells Barnett was one of the original ride or die chicks. Okay. Because this sister carried a pistol on one time. She advocated for African Americans to have a Winchester in every African American home. She was a reformer who gathered the first statistical recordings on lynchings in the United States. And she was born in Hollis Springs, Missouri, July 6, 1862. Okay. I got to post an article about her, man. This sister right here was not playing. This was a real Renaissance woman. Okay. And she was a member, I think if I remember correctly, she was a member of the Afro-American Council Okay, that was formed in 1898. But she was one of the founding members of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, also. Okay. Yeah, because she was in the Afro-American Council, and she was in the Niagara movement as well. She was in the Niagara movement, and William Monroe Trotter fell out with the Niagara movement because he was against women joining, and he's going to leave the Niagara movement, form another organization. William Monroe Trotter, who's a bad brother also in his own right, little male chauvinistic, but William Monroe Trotter is going to be one of the organizers of the NAACP, but he did not join the NAACP because he was alarmed by the white money flowing into the NAACP. Okay, but we know that Dr. W.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells Barnett are going to be founding members of the NAACP. Of the about 57 or so members, only about 7 were African American of the founding members. So she was born July 6, 1852. July 6, 1852. And I got to post an article from blackden.com about Ida B. Wells Barnett and the Moss Store Massacre. The Moss Store Massacre. Okay, this date in 1868. So this is 3 years after the Civil War ends. The South Carolina General Assembly met with a African American majority among their legislators. This date in 1868. This became the first time in American legislature had an African American majority. Okay, this is in South Carolina, 1868. Because there are a lot of African Americans in South Carolina. This is during Reconstruction. During Reconstruction, and Reconstruction is going to bring about a backlash to African Americans when Reconstruction ends in 1877 with the Compromise of 1877. And anytime we make significant advancements, there's always a backlash. Richard Nixon was elected president in 1868 as a backlash to African American advancement, a backlash to the Civil Rights Act, to the Civil Rights Movement, Voting Rights Act, Black Power movement, things like this. Donald Trump, with the help of Russia, he's about to meet his daddy, Vladimir Putin, on Friday. The Darth Vader's about to meet the Emperor. Remember, Darth Vader was bad when he was in the room with other people. The Emperor came into the room. Darth Vader bowed down to the Emperor. Yes, my Lord. What can I do, my Lord? You want me to shine your shoes, my Lord? Okay. So Donald Trump is about to meet his daddy, Vladimir Putin. Okay. That's why he doesn't say anything bad about Vladimir Putin. Because Donald Trump is the first Russian president of the United States of America. He is a Russian asset. Okay. And when the information comes out, all the information comes out. I've been telling you for months. If you've been listening to the podcast, you've been watching my shows, if you've seen the articles that I posted, I've been telling you for months that Russia was behind the hacking of the DNC. Russia interfered with the election. They wanted Donald Trump to be president over Hillary Clinton. I told you that I've been predicting all this stuff here. And when all this information comes out, is going to be worse than Watergate. When all this information comes out, is going to be worse than Watergate. You understand? Watergate was a third-rate break-in. Okay, Watergate was a third-rate break-in. The real problem with Watergate wasn't the break-in; it was the cover-up. It was the cover-up, and Richard Nixon was forced to resign from office. Articles of impeachment were drawn up. First article of impeachment, obstruction of justice. Second article of impeachment, abuse of power. Who does that sound like? Richard Nixon resigned from office. He got a pardon from Gerald Ford, who became president. But 48 people around Richard Nixon went to prison because they helped in the cover-up. 48 people around Richard Nixon went to prison because they helped in the cover-up. So those working in the White House, I hope you have lawyered up because you're going to need it. I hope you have lawyered up because you're going to need it, because when all this information comes out, and former, if you watch MSNBC, and I watch it every day, you watch MSNBC, They have been interviewing former prosecutors and assistant prosecutors in Watergate. And they're all saying what's going on right now with Trump and Russia. They're saying this stuff is worse than Watergate. They were involved in Watergate. They're saying this is worse than Watergate. Okay. So mark my words, it's going to be a whole lot of people going down. All right. Continue this date in African American history. Let's see. Okay. So Althea Gibson. Okay. Althea Gibson, and watch me on Facebook. Okay, so Althea Gibson, tennis legend, African-American tennis legend, won the women's Wimbledon singles championship July 6, 1957, becoming the first African-American person to do so. Althea Gibson, she was a legend. The African nation of Malawi, gained their independence July 6, 1964. Daniel Lewis Satchmo Armstrong, better known as Louis Armstrong, Daniel Lewis Satchmo Armstrong, legendary trumpeter, died in Corona, Queens, New York. This date, 1971. The African nation of Comoros, C-O-M-O-R-O-S, African nation of Comoros, gained its independence on this date in 1975. And on this date in 1936, this date in 1990, Olympic gold medalist Jesse Owens, winner of 4 Olympic gold medals in Berlin at the 1936 Olympics, he was commemorated on a U.S. postage stamp. This date in 1990. This date in 1990, Jesse Owens was commemorated on a U.S. postage stamp. You can read more facts about this date in African history and African American history at yenoba.com. Y-E-N-O-B-A, yenoba.com. Okay. All right. So Stephanie said, "Oh, brother." What are you saying, "Oh, brother," about? Sandy said 100 times worse than Watergate. Yeah, this is collusion with a foreign power, foreign adversary to influence the election, to favor one candidate over another. And you're gonna find out these fools knew about it. You're gonna find out that Trump and all them, no, this is collusion. That you're gonna find out they knew about it. Now the question is, what did you know and when did you know it? But no, there's evidence of collusion also. And Representative Adam Schiff, who's on the U.S. House of Representatives Intel Committee, he's part of the Gang of 8, if I remember correctly. He sees the most sensitive. Intelligence, okay, because there's a gang of 8. There are 8. It's a combination of 8 U.S. senators and members of the House of Representatives who see the most sensitive U.S. intelligence. He was on All In with Chris Hayes, July 6, 2017, 8 p.m. edition. Go to msnbc.com. You can watch the clip there. He was interviewed, and Chris Hayes asked him, because Trump was in Poland this morning and waffling over Russia's involvement. And he said, yeah, I believe it was Russia, but it could have been other countries, blah, blah, blah. And Chris Hayes asked Representative Adam Schiff, he said, you see the most sensitive intelligence. He said, have you seen any intelligence that says it was other countries besides Russia? He said, no. He said, no, this was Russia. This was Russia involved in this. This was Russia behind this. And I'm just telling you, hold on to your seats, because this stuff about to drop. And if you look at Robert Mueller, special counsel, Robert Mueller, former FBI director, you look at the prosecutors he's bringing on, it's going to be a whole lot of these people going to prison. I think Jared Kushner's going down. Jared Kushner has a $285 million loan from Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is the largest creditor to Donald Trump. Deutsche Bank got popped by the U.S. government, Department of Justice, for laundering $10 billion in Russian money. This is all in the news. Deutsche Bank, research it. Preet Bharara was also investigating Deutsche Bank because Trump Tower was in Preet Bharara's jurisdiction in Manhattan, U.S. attorney in Manhattan, who Donald Trump fired. He fires Preet Bharara. Preet Bharara was also investigating Deutsche Bank, the largest creditor to Donald Trump. And we just found out a few days ago that Jared Kushner senior advisor to Donald Trump, who has no political experience, owes Deutsche Bank $285 million. Okay. All right. Yeah. Only white people can get away with some stuff like this and get this far. I'm telling you, this is white privilege at its finest. Only white people could get away with some stuff with some criminal stuff like this and get this far. But God don't like ugly, so your asses are going down. All right. Okay. All right. So, hey, guys, we got to get out of here. Hey, register for our online class at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, we have a bundle pack, a bundle course pack for $80. You can register for all 4 of my classes for $80, regularly $120. So that saves you $40 here. Hey, remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.